The events take place in a well-guarded mansion, surrounded by a huge number of security guards. The entire area was protected from unwanted visitors, as well as from possible attacks by bandits. Meanwhile, a girl named Jang Ming and a guy named Pa-san were discussing that they should hurry up and leave this place as they might be in danger. Pa-san was extremely confident and convinced Jang Ming that she should relax since the gang of assassins that attacked only posed a minor threat. Pa-san himself was convinced that his authority extended throughout Southeast Asia. Suddenly, a mysterious girl in a mask appeared behind them, holding 2 pistols in her hands, one of which she pointed at Pa-san. The couple, who were in bed, were shocked that even numerous security guards could not prevent the killer from breaking into their room. However, the mysterious girl believed that the guards were good, but failed to cope with her intentions. Immediately after this, the killer took out a card with the name of the victim who needed to be eliminated. After studying the card, the killer girl realized that she needed to kill Pa-san and fired the shot. The bullet pierced the villain's skull, and he screamed in unbearable pain, trying to cope with the blow. After eliminating the first target, the girl intended to shoot Jiang Ming, but suddenly someone from the audience shot at her. The killer instantly realized that it was a sniper, and Jiang Ming immediately rushed to help, grabbing her weapon to defend herself. In an effort to survive, Jiang Ming grabbed a gun and started shooting, fighting tensely for her life. Despite numerous shots, the clumsy girl was unable to hit, as the killer deftly dodged each shot. In order to avoid death, Jiang Ming decided to make a desperate jump through the window, realizing that it was worth doing so in order to be saved. It turned out that a sniper was nearby and made an accurate shot at the attacker. This outcome of events pleased the sniper, realizing that his mission was accomplished and his goal achieved. Sometime later, events unfolded in a coastal city in Southeast Asia. Evening came, and many people came out to the market to spend time and have a snack. The youth drank alcohol and relaxed after a hard day's work. A group of former classmates were sitting nearby, talking and drinking, but one of them refused to join the drinking. The refusal caused surprise in their company, and they could not understand why the guy, who had previously distinguished himself at school, now did not want to drink. The young man confidently stated that he didn't care what he did, and that work was just work. But for a classmate, a profession was not as important as a person's personality. Their society was realistic, and it was not easy to overcome the established hierarchy. Another classmate asked me to predict their future. The girl agreed and asked Dean Eno to extend his hand. Dean agreed, and the girl asked him not to play, since she usually took money for it, but now she was satisfied with just gratitude. Looking at his hand, she predicted that in the near future Dina would be lucky with women. The young man was soon to meet his beloved, and for him it turned out to be a pleasant event. The lady was shocked when she noticed something unexpected while staring at her hand, and it caused a feeling of strangeness in her. Suddenly Dean stood up and headed towards the exit, asking everyone to wait a bit, and no one understood where he was going. It turned out that he approached a criminal who had robbed a passerby and asked him if he liked being a scoundrel. The criminal was scared by such an unexpected reaction and wanted to know who this mysterious guy was, but only asked to return the money to avoid problems with the police. The criminal threatened the boy with a knife, ordering him to leave, but promised not to kill him if he ran to his mother. The young man deftly intercepted the knife from the criminal, using his agility. Dean stopped the criminal and captured him to prevent further crimes. The brave guy realized that the criminal was not afraid of the police, but did not like them, and this made it difficult to resolve the situation according to the law. The main character decided to teach the criminal a lesson by slamming his face hard into the asphalt. After a strong blow, the main character of the bandit began to have a headache, and the blow was unexpected as he planned to use a different method for punishment. The criminal resisted, screaming that he should not be touched anymore because of the severe pain. The bandit's friends began to approach, worried about what was happening, and they saw how an ordinary courier defeated a powerful bandit. Sometime later, at the police station, the bandit apologized to the policeman, promising not to bother him anymore and to invite him to dinner, and after that he was released without punishment. The hero was shocked that the police did not take any action in this situation. The bandit was happy with this outcome of events and stated that he could not be a bandit without the support of the police to avoid punishment, and he also mentioned Dean Eno. Waving his hand, the man merely said that they would see each other again in the future. The worried comrade asked his friend to be careful, realizing that the criminal would come back for him soon. Thinking about this, the hero realized that the villains remained unpunished and expressed a desire to destroy them. A classmate ran up and said that she could not predict Dean Eno's fate, but only saw a bloody mist, warning him to be careful. These words amused the young man, and he thanked his friends, realizing that they were acting together. Dean Eno said goodbye to his former classmates and assured them that everything would be fine. He also told the girl not to tell fortunes anymore, otherwise she would be left alone. A few minutes later, the young man found himself in a gateway, walking in the rain. Looking around, he noticed something unusual and decided to pay attention to it. Approaching the trash bins, the guy discovered a wounded female killer, which shocked him. It turned out to be a wounded female killer, and Dean Eno realized that his girlfriend had predicted his luck with women. He noticed a photo of the famous businessman Bong. I looked at the girl's body and realized that she had serious problems. Realizing this, he decided that the girl really needed help. Looking at her, Ding Eno realized that she was seriously injured and decided to act as if he hadn't seen her before. Touching the girl's body, the guy felt something strange and suddenly realized what was happening to her. A picture appeared in his mind of an unknown man standing in a fire, the flames engulfing his body. The mysterious girl suddenly raised her head, feeling someone's closeness. Pulling out her gun, she immediately threatened Dean Eno, thinking that he intended to harm her, but the guy assured her that he could help. The masked stranger only stated that she would not be able to repay him for his help. It would be a selfless act. Taking something out of his pocket, the guy said that he didn't have time to explain. Smiling, he put on his cap and told her that if she wanted to survive, she should obey his instructions. The hero's car was parked nearby, and they hurried to it to leave the scene. Dean asked the girl to wait a little so she could hide in the trash can and avoid detection. Walking down the street, the guy suddenly noticed a group of men looking around the area. They were dressed in black suits and resembled secret agents, reporting on the radio that they had not found what they were looking for. Looking like a garbage man, the guy calmly walked past the men, not paying any attention to them, even though they were armed. This behavior was strange for an experienced investigator, and any casual observer would have been surprised by it. Soon they approached the car. There was only a little bit left. One of the men suddenly aimed a gun at the guy and ordered him to stop. This raised suspicions as no other garbage man had ever behaved so calmly, and it was very suspicious. The hero realized that his behavior was too calm for an ordinary person. But the realization came too late, and the man began shooting, hitting a trash can several times. A mysterious girl jumped out of it, armed with pistols, and began shooting at the attackers, defending her life and the life of Dina Eno. Her marksmanship was impressive, and she was able to easily take out one of the attackers. The experienced guy was hiding behind a trash can the whole time to avoid being shot by accident. Another enemy continued to shoot, trying to kill their boss's killer, because that's what they were sent for. The stranger continued to repel the attacks, doing everything possible to save her life and that of her new partner. A few seconds later, the hero got on his motorcycle to escape, realizing that their lives were in danger. As soon as the motorcycle started, Ding Eno ordered the stranger to take a seat in the car so that they could leave faster. They accelerated to maximum speed to escape the pursuit of their enemies. The men in tuxedos continued to fire at the trailer, hoping to damage their target. The brave girl also parried the attacks, using both pistols and continuing to shoot accurately to destroy each of the enemies. Suddenly, she noticed that multiple shots had damaged the trailer's body. Using her foot, she decided to kick down the door to allow for more effective shooting. Thanks to her skill, Killer was able to knock out a window in the trailer and start shooting right from it. She also had an unusual device in her hands that helped her shoot explosives. With the help of a powerful explosion, the main character and the girl were able to escape from the scene, since the enemies were unable to determine where they went next. Watching what was happening, the agents realized that they would not be able to catch up with their target. The most experienced agent began to say that they still needed to make sure that their enemies couldn't escape, because one of the pieces of evidence found at the scene of the shooting was a cap with the company's name on it. After some time, the tired guy stopped his motorcycle and asked his companion to get out of the trailer. Noticing that his partner was not reacting at all, he decided to go out and check what had happened to her. Looking into the trailer, the guy discovered a terrible picture and did not expect this to happen at all. Unfortunately, the girl who fought so bravely against the enemies died and could no longer resist evil. While the events were unfolding in the mansion where this story began, one of the agents asked the widow if she would agree to help them with the investigation, because it was important for them to know whether Jang Ming had seen the killer's face. The woman only said that everything happened very quickly, and she did not have time to see the face, and if she had any other information, she would definitely tell the agents. In fact, the special agents were seeking revenge for Pa San, who had previously helped them. When saying goodbye to her husband, Jang Ming asked the agents to leave. She wanted to be alone. Coming closer, one of the servants reported that the killer was saved by his partner, but Jang Ming asked to leave him to Kurogi because the enemy was stronger than they thought. The slightly alarmed man nodded and promised to take this into account. Also nearby were tied-up agents who had previously tried to avenge their boss's death, but to no avail. Sitting down next to her dead husband, the woman said that the agents should be given a chance to correct their mistakes and go again to avenge Pa San. After kissing her husband, Jang Ming swore that after he left, she would definitely return to see him. At the same time, incidents continued to unfold at the fishing pier. Standing in the rain, the main character reflected on the fact that he had lost his cap. The delivery van was damaged, and Pashin servants were surely following them. In addition, all delivery points in the city will be checked, and a search for the killer's assistant will begin. The point where the young man was located was not the closest to the scene of the incident, but still, they would not be able to track him down so quickly. Having infiltrated one of the delivery companies, the young man only thought about how long he would have to hide. It's time to change delivery vans to buy time. While stealing a motorcycle, Dean Eno began connecting wires to start it. It took some time, but thanks to these manipulations, the hero managed to start the motorcycle. The guy found a strange note hanging on a rope on the handle of his motorcycle. He immediately read the note, thinking about what had happened to him, and he almost killed a man, years of hatred, and now he got a clue that he paid dearly for. Now, this was the best way, but it didn't mean that Dean Eno would become the same as the killers he had taken out. Since he saved the mysterious girl, if something happens, the killers will come to him. A few hours later, the events continued in the main character's house. His classmate was already yawning and getting ready to go to bed when there was a knock at the door. It was Dean Eno who was seeking help from the girl. Entering the room, the guy apologized for arriving late and expressed his request. He needed to leave something at the station, and as a token of gratitude, he offered a massage. The hero also asked how the girl was feeling. It turned out that the mysterious girl was alive, although she had received several wounds, most of which were minor, with the exception of the bullet wound, but her physical condition allowed her to remain safe. The killer was unconscious and would remain so for another 2 days, so it was necessary to continue giving her medication. A caring former classmate gave Dean Eno a list of medications he needed to buy. The guy was surprised by how good his girlfriend was as a doctor, like a professional who was performing expensive treatment. These words angered her friend a little, as she declared that she understood medicine much better than her strange comrade. However, people who did not know her last acquaintance were interested in where she got her injuries. The friend, a little worried, still decided to find out whether they were friends with the mysterious girl or sleeping together, and she literally asked to tell her the truth. Grabbing his girlfriend by the shoulders, the young man began to embarrass her greatly, but still decided to tell her something. The girl's heart began to beat much faster, and she blushed, not expecting Dean to pay attention to her. This behavior was surprising, because the former classmate could never have imagined that such a handsome man would pay attention to her. It turned out that he had simply asked his friend to come home and have a good rest, although she was dizzy from embarrassment. At the same time, the stranger continued to remain unconscious due to the drug she was given. Memories from her past life, where she fought against many opponents, suddenly began to appear in her dreams. These memories instantly brought the girl back to consciousness, and she felt a sharp pain. At this time, the protagonist's girlfriend began to insult him, expecting completely different behavior from her friend. Looking at her attractively, Dean Eno asked her to go to dinner. This proposal made the lady very happy, and she was delighted, as if she had been conquered at first sight. She was so charmed that she didn't even notice how she was already being put into a taxi to go home. A little embarrassed, the guy began to say goodbye to his girlfriend, who was furious because no one had ever done that to her. Dean Eno still felt guilty for his actions and apologized for taking advantage of his girlfriend's feelings, and he knew that he didn't deserve her friendship and love. Returning to his home, the guy began to watch the stranger again, who was still unconscious. He immediately began to study her equipment to understand what technology she possessed. Her costume left an impressive impression, and although the equipment seemed cute, he still longed to see what the stranger actually looked like. At this time, using her equipment, the girl was able to keep an eye on the young man who saved her. Showing deep interest, the boy began to peer at the mask and begged her to let him see her true face. Suddenly, there was a click and the girl's mask disappeared, after which she asked if she looked okay. And the guy somehow flew at high speed into the wall and hit it. All this happened because the stranger could not stand such behavior and kicked her savior hard in the stomach. In great pain, Dean Eno asked the girl to wait, since he had saved her life, and he did not understand why she was constantly threatening him, as if she did not take him seriously. Taking a fighting stance, the young man stated that he trained in kung fu and therefore could defend himself. Realizing that this was not the case, the mysterious girl simply continued to watch him and remain silent. The next day brought new events when the hero decided to visit the pharmacy. To maintain the health of the rescued girl, he purchased a large number of medications. Standing at the checkout counter, Dean Eno could only think about how lately he felt like he was under a curse. After all, sooner or later, enemies will check his company, and, as a colleague, he must warn his partner. Suddenly, a new message appeared on the young man's smartphone, and he immediately took out his phone. It turned out that his partner reported that some scoundrels were looking for Ding Yino, and he had better hide and not come to the company anymore. A large number of armed men came to the company to interrogate one of the employees about the whereabouts of Ding Yino. In fact, it was a bandit whom the young man had previously beaten up badly, and the delivery worker could not tell where Dean was because he did not know it. Feeling enraged, the villain sought to find out where his offender was by any means possible, and ordered his men to destroy everything in the office. Suddenly, the young man showed up at the delivery service office and addressed the bandit nicknamed Broken Nose. This appeal greatly angered the bandit, who decisively invaded the office to interrogate the young man's boss. With his incredible strength, Ding Yino instantly neutralized the two villains who were nearby. Waving his hand, he jokingly said that he heard that the bandit already missed him. The only sounds heard in the building were the screams of the bandits and loud bangs accompanied by shouts. Just a few minutes later, the boss personally thanked Dean for helping him out in a difficult situation. For the bandit himself, these events were a real blow to his pride, because he was humiliated in front of his accomplices. As Dean addressed the hanging bandit, he had only one thing to say to him, and remember what you saw. Dean was going to warn the bandit, and if he hurt others again, he would not escape severe punishment. Looking straight into Dean's eyes, the criminal felt like he had seen that look somewhere before. This look was typical of the most dangerous prisoners, the real monsters of the prisons. That is why the bandit felt that he was facing a real killer and decided that it was better for him not to enter into conflict with this guy anymore. Pointing to the door, the good-natured guy suggested that they better leave this place and never come back. Smiling, the bandit tried to apologize, realizing his guilt and understanding that the guy was really strong and there was no point in conflicting with him anymore. The protagonist's partner had been watching the bandits and thought that they would not appear here again, and indeed, they were afraid that Mr. Wong would take revenge on them. After thinking for a moment, Ding Yino decided to warn Mr. Wong about his departure from the company. This was a surprise to Mr. Wong, and he did not understand why the boy decided to leave. While the hero could not yet explain why he was leaving, he decided that he could no longer work for this company. And if someone comes looking for him, the boss needs to be told that he doesn't know the guy. Mr. Wong became angry and thought that Ding Yino had gotten into trouble because of those bandits, so he asked him not to worry about them. As he left, the boy explained that his uncle did not need to look for a reason, and that he should pretend that he had never heard of Ding Yino. Continuing to smoke, the gentleman only looked into the distance and thought about the behavior of such an intelligent and capable guy. Suddenly, someone started approaching the man from behind, apparently, to ask him a question. It turned out that they were agents of the Postal Association who had come to check the condition of the vans. At this time, the bandits were hiding in the bushes, discussing plans with their boss. They decided to leave the city immediately, realizing that this guy was stronger than they expected, and they were ashamed of it. The boss took something out of his pocket to show it to his partners. It turned out to be a bottle of medicine, and the bandit thought the guy must have a weakness and wanted to know how to use it against him. They planned to use this medicine to take revenge on Ding Yino. Even though they couldn't defeat him on their own, there were still those who could, and they needed to contact Officer Liu and inform him of the task. After some time, events unfolded in the main character's house. Dean, along with the medicine, headed inside the apartment to help the mysterious girl he saved. Putting the medicine on the nightstand, he decided to talk to the girl first before asking her to take the medicine. However, she was not in the bed, and the young man thought that she had run away. In fact, the stranger was very close, hiding like a ninja to determine if she was in danger. She soon took out her blade and began to threaten the young man, admitting that he was a good man, but it was difficult for her to wait for him all this time. After a few minutes, the girl was already devouring all the food that was brought and refused to share with him. She also stripped the guy naked and humiliated him, despite the fact that he saved her out of the kindness of his heart. The girl did not give in to the young man's threats and began shooting. The bullet flew past his head. The girl didn't care. She even wanted to punish her savior, although he was not guilty. Unable to bear it any longer, the young man shouted that those who were pursuing her could appear at any moment, and she needed to leave immediately. All this made the hero very angry, but the strange girl did not react in any way. Putting a gun to his head, she told him that he might be wrong and that his end would soon come. The worried young man could not understand why the girl was behaving this way, because he saved her, and she cannot just leave him because gangsters also have their own rules. Unfortunately, this girl turned out to be a killer and decided to say goodbye to Dean Yino because she was already bored with him. She then began to pull the trigger of the gun, preparing to shoot. Feeling anxious, Dean started screaming, begging her not to do this, as he had other plans. He understood that death was a few millimeters away from him, and in a minute it could shoot. Although Dean lied often in life, it was a habitual behavior for him. The guy was silent for a moment, and the girl couldn't take it anymore. hitting him with the gun, thinking that he wanted to say something. The hero asked her if she believed in fate and if she had ever wondered why they met on that cold and rainy night. The boy started crying and said he thought it was a special meeting, but when he sees the girl fighting these guys with a gun, his heart breaks. He didn't want to feel guilty because he had spent time achieving nothing, and life was short, and he wanted to make it unforgettable. So, even if this girl was a bandit or a murderer, it didn't matter to him. He asked to be given the opportunity to help her. He had 2 degrees from Queen's University, and if she intended to destroy that talent, it was her choice. The one called the Drama King, Dean Yino, will give her this opportunity, and she will be able to take advantage of it. These statements slightly offended the girl, but she still praised the young man. However, she is not his trophy, and she is not so easily deceived. Aiming the gun at the boy's head, she pulled the trigger again. As it turned out, the gun was out of bullets at the time, and she handed it to Dean, noting that he was really funny. Smiling, the lady also announced that she would still give him another chance. Pointing a pistol at the courier, she indicated that an unknown man would soon appear in the building. The first lesson for a killer will be to be cold-blooded. Of the 2, only one can survive, and what lies ahead is not just a fight, but a struggle to the death. The girl began to count to 3, and Dean Eno could not understand how this was possible, and why he would kill a stranger. It turned out that the courier needed to find Dean Eno to deliver a package to him, and the neighbor kindly told him. The enraged lady continued to yell at the guy to make a decision about killing the courier as soon as possible. All this time, the young man watched the unfamiliar man, wondering whether he should fire the shots. Raising the knife to his throat, the woman continued to threaten him, saying that if he did not do this, his end would come. Dean Eno couldn't stand the pressure and started shooting his gun to kill the stranger. All the bullets missed, and the chaotic shooting brought no results as the shots were wide. With a clumsy movement, the girl hit the hero hard on the head, not understanding how this could have happened. The courier showed unusual abilities and deftly dodged, performing a somersault. The courier turned out to be undercover and was actually an agent who reported that the target had been located. After this, he announced to all teams that it was necessary to begin the operation and, taking out a submachine gun, began shooting directly into the window. Realizing that they were in danger, the mysterious stranger began to hide behind the young man, hoping that the bullets would not hit her. Within a few minutes, a huge number of agents had already gathered near the main character's house, preparing for the capture operation. A concerned neighbor contacted the officer, reporting that his daughter was still in the building. The officer didn't care at all and just looked mockingly at the man. Immediately after this, he shot the stranger in the head, saying that they would soon meet their daughter. Meanwhile, the young man began to scream in pain as the stranger shot him in the leg. The pain was unbearable, and the hero was twisted by it, not understanding why she did this. As it turned out, the girl believed that the guy should protect her, so she decided to shoot so that Dean Eno would not get bored. Winking at him, she confessed her feelings and asked for forgiveness for her actions. Another shot rang out, and the young man received a second wound, which only increased his suffering. In parting, the stranger blew him a kiss and reminded him of the importance of caution. Filled with rage, Ding Yino shouted that he would definitely take revenge on her for her betrayal. Suddenly, the door to the main character's room was knocked down with force, and a huge number of agents were standing behind it. While trying to escape, the brave girl suggested that if Ding Yino survived, he could become her disciple. Analyzing what was happening, the hero realized that his time was up, and he felt like a complete loser. Having learned the truth, the young man concluded that he should not trust women. This girl was especially sinister, which made her an even more dangerous opponent. Upon entering the room, the agents noticed that their main target had escaped, and they needed to act immediately. The boss grabbed one of his subordinates by the head, intending to demonstrate a trick. Having captured the soldier, the boss began to climb down from the window with him, as if using him instead of a snowboard. After a dangerous jump, Boss miraculously survived, thanks to the fact that a soldier softened his fall. This time, the villain persistently pursued the killer, not intending to give her a chance to escape, not even paying attention to his fate. After exiting the wrecked car, the man immediately sprang into action, quickly approaching his target. One of the soldiers watched as his comrade became a human shield to soften his fall, realizing that this method of death was truly cruel. These events made the hero think that this villain does not even value his allies, and his actions are devoid of humanity. The soldier exclaimed that their former leader was dead, and he would now take over the leadership, ordering the rest of the soldiers to help the captain. This guy, left without clothes, deserved to be punished. The impudent man shamelessly ordered the young man to shut up, reminding him that the interrogation had not yet begun and it was too early for him to speak. At the same time, the killer girl fought with a huge detachment of soldiers aimed at eliminating her. There were indeed a lot of soldiers, and it was extremely difficult for one girl to cope with such a number of opponents. At the same time, she began to run out of ammunition, which greatly limited her chances of escape. Looking at her supplies, the stranger realized that they were depleted and there was no way to get new ammunition. The astute agents immediately noticed that their target was running out of ammunition and decided to actively move forward. However, the soldiers needed to capture the target alive, not kill it. At this point, the interrogation began, and the hero was asked about his favorite pet, considering that cats are the most difficult to train, but Dean Eno had eyes like a cat. The villain was good at taming animals, and he trained cats much more successfully than dogs. Suddenly, the police arrived at the scene and easily found Dean Eno's address, since the investigation into the murder of a postal company employee required meticulousness. It turned out that the information about the location was provided by a bandit who had a special hatred for him and was seeking revenge. A large number of police officers in bulletproof vests headed to the crime scene after hearing gunshots nearby. During this time, the brave girl continued to fight, surviving thanks to the weapons of her opponents. The soldiers were unable to deal with such a strong opponent, as her agility made her a difficult target. One of the soldiers took out a flare gun to destroy it and make it impossible to continue the fight. Realizing that she was in danger, Killer immediately decided to run away, realizing that she would not be able to cope with such an explosion. The girl's partner contacted her and noticed that she looked depressed. The outraged lady reported that she had run out of ammunition and his technical devices were not working. The villains around thought they could win, given their numerical superiority. The partner did not object to this and asked her to act according to the situation, but ordered her to protect his technology. At this point, Killer decided to use her secret weapon and warned her opponents of their inevitable death. At first, strange metal structures appeared from her hands, which were probably her secret weapon. Grabbing these metal structures, the girl connected them, causing a powerful lightning aura. With this device, she created a rift in the worlds, attacking her opponents. Each of the soldiers was simply stunned by what they saw, as it seemed almost magical. The device she held resembled the magical blaster she intended to use to attack her opponents. Thanks to this powerful weapon, she had the opportunity to win, since powerful blasters could shoot lightning over great distances. The bandit and the police were stunned by what they were seeing. They had never seen such technology before. Soon after, the police decided to retreat because it was useless for them to fight such a strong enemy. Now the captain knew that the police had arrived, but the main thing for them was to cut off the area, because they would soon be here, and there was little time left. At the same time, the villain continued to interrogate the protagonist and did everything possible to make the young man talk. The soldier enjoyed punching Dean Eno, expecting the boy to become more talkative after a couple of blows. Trembling with pain, the young man began to confess that the stranger had drawn him into this matter, and he knew nothing. The criminal didn't care and was preparing to use brass knuckles to make the interrogation more effective. For a moment, the hero lost consciousness, and it was as if someone began to talk to him. The strange voice continued to call out to Dean Eno, insisting that he should not stop. Seeing the strange entity, the guy was shocked, not understanding who was in front of him. It turned out that was the spirit of the stranger, who reminded Dean of his promise not to give up and fight for survival. Kneeling down, he admitted that he did not feel strong and wanted to rest, as he was very tired. A strange spirit warned him that if he gave up now, he would never be able to rise again, and he must remember what he heard. Dean felt a strong fear when he looked at this entity, but he remembered all its words. In such a difficult situation, he needed to continue his revenge and take action. At this time, the impudent man was about to strike, putting brass knuckles on his hand and ordering the young man not to move. The boy shouted with all his might that he would never give up, thanks to which he stopped the attacking soldier's hand and avoided death. The soldier tried his best to strike and destroy the resisting guy. There was a knife hanging next to him that he wanted to use to test how strong the guy was. The soldier pulled out a knife, attempting to stab and pointing it towards Dean Eno's head. The main character's strength was so great that he easily repelled the enemy's attack and damaged his arm. From such a counterattack, the villain began to squeal in pain, realizing that he was no longer able to continue the fight. So the guy took the initiative into his own hands, realizing that now he would finish this fight and finally win. The skilled soldier freed himself from the grip and decided to continue hand-to-hand combat, but Dean Eno proved to be much stronger. With a powerful kick, the hero hit the impudent man right in the face, expressing his hatred for him. Thanks to his agility and strength, Dean Eno was able to finish the fight, winning in just a few blows. Now he has a way to punish all his enemies for their crimes, and they must pay. The soldier, he decided to use a cloth mask and turn on a small stream of water, using an ancient torture to bring him to madness. At the same time, he was preparing to continue the fight, looking for what he had long ago hidden under the bed. Under the bed, he found a huge suitcase containing something very valuable. It was his grandfather's ancient bow, with which he was going to take revenge on his offenders. At one time, Ding Yino also planned to avenge his grandfather with his own hands, as losing him caused him great anger. At this time, strange robots resembling huge bees appeared on the battlefield. The stranger began to doubt that her enemies were serious, but still decided to destroy them all. It turned out that the weapon was useless against these enemies, as she had completely used up her ammunition. Looking around and keeping an eye on the enemies who would soon be near her, the girl realized that she could deal with them herself. At this time, a brave young man came out of the entrance, taking with him a bow and a quiver of arrows to continue the battle. As he scanned the street, he realized that the district police would soon arrive and he needed to find his employer before they arrived. Now it was important for the hero to prove himself as a good citizen and do a good deed. Luckily, there was a delivery car nearby, and he decided to go closer to inspect it. Having opened the trailer door, the hero did not understand why the car was not in the company garage. Inside the trailer, he saw a terrible sight, which greatly angered Dean Eno. What he saw crushed the boy, and it was very hard for him, realizing that someone dear to him had died. This caused even more anger, and the guy began to bend the metal door with his bare hands. All this only increased his anger, and he sought to take revenge on everyone who was involved in Uncle Wong's death. A call was received at the secret headquarters, and many soldiers were equipped in advanced uniforms to eliminate the criminals. Each of the soldiers was ready for battle, as they received a call to shoot in the cherry blossom area. A huge number of shots were aimed directly at the mysterious girl, who fought bravely and dodged the bullets. Approaching one of the cars, she first removed the door, using it as a shield. She then mounted the door on a huge katana to perform one secret trick. Thanks to her strength, the girl was able to lift a huge door and throw it at the robot bees. The door hit several bees, causing an explosion that destroyed some of the enemies. The explosion injured the girl, and she had to resort to a secret technique as she realized she was trapped. The partner just laughed, noting that the power of fire and robots was really great, and he was sure that the girl would cope quickly. The mercenary did not accept such answers and exclaimed that it would be better if her partner kept quiet, otherwise she would shove his gadgets very deep. The man denied any involvement in the malfunction of the technology, considering it only a minor flaw, but warned that he had set up the weapon in such a way that the charge could be too strong. The secret weapon had been deployed, and now Killer was ready for round 2 of the fight against her enemies. As the soldiers watched, they saw that their target was engulfed in flames, and the bee robots had lost their target. The experienced military man realized that this weapon was extremely unusual and seemed to have some occult science mixed into it. Despite this, he ordered his soldiers to continue firing and attack from behind the curtain of fire. The bees immediately resumed firing, as they were programmed to destroy targets and were set up specifically to end the battle. The soldiers also continued to fight, trying to hit the girl with their fire. Many rounds of ammunition were expended in shooting at the fire, although the target itself was invisible. Suddenly, the girl jumped out of the fire and headed towards the soldiers to take revenge. She passed through many killer bees and immediately rushed towards the men who continued to shoot at her. The boss was shocked by this turn of events, seeing the killer running straight towards him. Each of the mercenaries continued to shoot, and the boss exclaimed that he was ready to fight, drawing his knife. With her skills, the girl easily destroyed several dozen soldiers, and only one mercenary remained in her path. The brave warrior, using her weapon, destroyed absolutely all the soldiers and reached the main boss, attacking him. The bandit was able to repel the attack with his hunting knife and stated that the girl's reputation as a killer fully justified her. Hearing this, the girl only shouted that she had no time to talk. Using her agility and strength, she also exclaimed that she was in a hurry, so she would not talk. The smart girl believed that the mercenary boss was wasting her time and was not worthy of her attention. Laughing, the bandit exclaimed that he was ready to sacrifice his life, since he had no hope of winning. With a clever attack, Killer easily destroyed one of the mercenaries' arms, leaving him in the fight with only one arm. While soldiers armed with the latest weapons approached in helicopters, all units were called to readiness, as arrival at the scene was expected to occur within 10 minutes. All this time, the police and the bandit were just watching what was happening and were very afraid of the killer. Unable to bear it any longer, the bandit decided to call the local police, but the person he was talking to only wanted to know who was calling. The policeman stopped the scoundrel, realizing that it was a walkie-talkie, not a telephone, and it was impossible to call the police on it. The policeman took the radio and started calling the police about the terrorist attack in the Sakura area, waiting for the arrival of a special squad and hoping for cooperation. The mercenary continued to fight the lady, hoping to win, even though he could only use one hand. Looking around, he analyzed the situation and realized that he had 10 mercenaries and a few drones left. the villain understood that it would be difficult for the killer to get away from here, given that many enemies continued to control its movement. Suddenly, someone started shooting a bow, releasing many arrows in a few seconds. Arrows fired from a bow were connected to grenades to create a powerful explosion upon impact. A huge number of arrows were aimed at the drones that were trying to attack the girl. The explosions destroyed all drones and soldiers in the vicinity. The mercenary noticed that Killer had an assistant, and dozens of arrows began to be aimed at him, but he deftly fought them off. Many shots were fired using the ancient weapon, and each arrow found its target. The experienced fighter was in severe pain and realized that he could no longer win this fight, since he was no longer the leader. At that moment, the criminal noticed a young man standing on the roof of the car and shooting a bow. This unexpected turn of events greatly surprised the experienced fighter, and he could not believe that the wounded guy could shoot so well. The clever Dean Eno apologized to his enemies, realizing that their boss no longer had a chance to win. Turning to the killer, the hero nevertheless decided to find out if there were still enemies somewhere, but as it turned out, there was only one enemy. This irritated the man even more, and he did not know how to deal with it. The girl pointed at the enemy squad boss, wanted to see if her new student could defeat the villain. Dean Yino was unhappy with the girl interrupting him and began yelling at her, demanding that she remain silent during the proceedings. The villain was annoyed that someone considered them small, but Killer explained to Dean Eno that they needed to finish the fight and leave as soon as possible. Looking at his enemy, the hero declared that he only needed 1 minute. Jumping off the roof of the car, he asked his girlfriend to start counting. The alarmed enemy continued to watch the young man and thought that he had to teach him a lesson. This lesson was supposed to teach young people like Dean Eno how to survive in this world. Luckily, the guy easily dodged the knife attack and shouted that his opponent would suffer during the fight. With full force, the young man struck the villain straight in the face using his leg. With his last strength, the wounded enemy screamed that Ding Yino would never be able to change this world and everything would remain as before. Ignoring the villain, the guy hit him hard in the face again, sending him flying back several dozen meters. Looking around, Killer and the hero noticed approaching helicopters. A huge modern tank armed with super powerful ammunition began to approach nearby. From the tank, orders were heard through a loudspeaker for the bandits to drop their weapons immediately, otherwise they would be fired upon. After exchanging glances, the partners began to discuss how to get out of here alive and avoid punishment. The hero approached his new partner with a question about the existence of a plan, but it turned out that she had not thought through the next steps, believing that they would not face punishment. With his last strength, the villain began to laugh, declaring that the couple had now lost. These words made the young man and woman furious, and they decided to finally finish off their enemy. The enemy gang boss was surprised by the arrival of the police who saved him, and now he realized that he would have to answer for his actions. One of the surviving mercenaries began firing a giant machine gun, trying to stop the police and delay their arrival. The young man grabbed his bow and shot 3 arrows, shouting that he would not let his enemy escape, as he had killed Uncle Wong and must be punished. Multiple machine gun shots failed to penetrate the armored vehicles of the special police unit. The police, unable to tolerate the mercenaries' impudence, decided to respond and use their weapons. Thanks to the police's modern weapons, the enemy armored vehicles were easily destroyed, exploding from a single shot. Without hesitation, the hero took aim at the villain to finish what he started and take revenge. Sensing danger, the enemy faction boss took action and made a desperate dash away from Ding Inua, pushing off with his legs to avoid death. Meanwhile, an armed detachment in state-of-the-art equipment emerged from the armored vehicle and began to move. Thanks to his skill, the villain survived and began to laugh, enjoying the situation. Enraged by this behavior, Ding Yino became even more furious and was ready to fire another shot from his bow. Special Forces soldiers were already approaching, shouting that everyone present had to stop and not move. The young man decided that he needed to finish what he started and was not going to lower his weapon. The boss laughed and suggested that Dean Eno learn something, considering it a rule of survival. The police surrounded the criminals, demanding that they surrender their weapons. None of the soldiers started shooting, and their commander repeated that everyone needed to drop their weapons. The enemy commander addressed the young man, ordering him to continue the attack. Realizing that this was a trap, the hero understood that he could not give in to provocations. But anger took possession of him, and he wanted to satisfy the desire of the scoundrel and finish him off. His partner begged Dean not to be an idiot and not to do this, even though he knew he was being provoked, and yet he wanted the villain to pay for his actions. The experienced killer understood that killers are devoid of emotions, and the main rule for them is to leave here, because only a living killer can scare others. The evil villain said goodbye, realizing that the military had arrested him, ordering the others to surrender and lie on the ground. As a result of this situation, the young man began to become very nervous. His hands were shaking. However, he decided not to open fire and asked his partner about their future plans. It turned out that she had knives and was going to attack to get out. They lay down on the ground and began counting. 3 seconds later, they crawled under the car to hide from the military. A sudden, huge explosion distracted the arriving army. No one noticed any opponents nearby, and the police began to approach the site of the explosion to begin the search. The mercenary boss realized that they had a plan, and it seemed that their puppy would be trained to become a hungry wolf. Perhaps they would meet again. Therefore, the soldiers were ordered to pursue the criminals in order to detain them, as many were wounded. As a squad of armed police officers approached a van behind, which the enemy group was believed to be hiding, the soldiers were caught in a trap, and many bombs were placed under their feet that could explode at any moment. And it happened, and the sudden explosion resulted in injuries and deaths of many soldiers. The skilled warriors had already managed to hide, using the sewer tunnels for concealment. The police, thinking that the criminals were inside or under the van, began to inspect it. To their surprise, there was no one in the van, meaning the criminals had managed to escape. No one was found inside the van either, which surprised the military. One of the police officers noticed a hatch under the car and realized that it could be an entrance to the sewer. Thus, all the soldiers learned that the entrance to the sewer was under the car, and they needed to go there. At the same time, events continued in the sewers, where there was a terrible stench. At this point, the team didn't care about the smell because they could hide here, and people always like to hide, which is a bad omen. The hero was shocked because he had never seen the girl so confused before. She seemed too cool, as if this was the result of her training. As it turned out, the girl simply had a filter in her mask, with the help of which she could breathe freely, and she did not care about the sewer. It was easy to get lost in this place, and the invincible warriors needed a guide, because they were like in a labyrinth. Suddenly, the girl decided to take off her mask to demonstrate an unusual trick. The mask in her hands was truly complex and had unusual functions. Unfortunately, without the mask, air filtration was not possible, and the stranger felt very ill. Immediately after the mask was removed, she rose into the air and greeted the assassin and the protagonist. At this time, events were taking place at the police station. A strange black car pulled up to the police station and stopped abruptly right in front of the entrance. There was a man and a woman in the car, and the unknown person decided to check whether she had really thought everything through, because if she got involved in this, she could die. Looking at the sign that said police station, the girl said that if she wanted to prove her worth, she had to have her own thing. Soon after that, they decided to go inside the police station, and once they entered, there was no turning back, and the man was going to protect his partner, and he didn't care what happened there. They began to enter the premises unhindered and headed straight towards a group of police officers. It turned out that the strangers actually wanted to help the police and find the suspects. Together, they arrived on orders, and it was necessary to investigate the Black Army group, and they were also given documents, and the girl hoped that the police would give them the opportunity to arrest Pashan. Pashan's possible arrest surprised all the police officers because they understood that it would be very difficult. Because Bong Pashan was killed a couple of days ago, the partners just looked at each other in shock. At this time, the mask led the protagonist and the girl through the sewer labyrinth, and they had almost reached the destination they had been working so hard towards. Making his way along the sewer stairs, the young man decided to find out what the destination was, and it turned out that it was some kind of shelter. The hatch leading to the shelter had a secret combination lock that could only be opened with a fingerprint. Touching the combination lock, the girl was able to open it easily, and they entered the shelter. After that, they started to get out of the sewer, and the young man was really surprised when he saw what was hidden behind that hatch. The shelter turned out to be impressive, and it didn't look like an ordinary building at all. Even the walls were golden in color. It turned out that it was the killer's house, and the girl happily invited Ding Eno there. Looking at the guy, Lady immediately thought that he was a little nervous because he had been acting strange all this time. Without hesitation, the hero simply replied that he had been through a lot and that he had nothing to fear at the moment, nor was there any reason to be nervous. A few seconds later, they arrived at the desired floor in the elevator, and the door began to gradually open. As soon as the door opened, the hero saw a giant statue and a stranger who exclaimed that finally, something good happened today. It was a butler named Tan, and he greeted number 48, as the girl was called, kindly. Although the girl did not like the man, she understood that he became like that in the presence of women, and sooner or later the company would fire him, and she also notified about the need for medical attention and data update. The card thrown to update the data was intercepted by someone else and did not reach Tan. The card was grabbed by the spirit of Ape, who walked on all fours and looked very much like a monkey. The creature was pleased to meet number 47, although it did not expect to see her in the South Asian operational circle. The monkey really liked Tan's cunning face but the man did not want to participate in this and remained aloof from their affairs. Hearing that the spirit of ape was the main examiner at the testing ground, the girl wanted to suggest a candidate who had been in her sights before. Everything that happened really shocked the young man, and he could not imagine that monkeys could talk. Shocked, Dean Eno began to ask the monkey how he managed to do it, but the girl interrupted him, saying that he was simply not very smart. Fortunately, the spirit of ape still agreed to examine this primate, but a little later. The monkey also decided to ask if the girl was really injured, and she replied that it was an accident caused by the sniper's actions, which slightly disrupted her plans, and thanks to this mission, her rating should have increased. Watching the monkey, the young man still could not believe that it was real and thought that it was just a robot controlled from afar. Jumping off the table, Spirit Ape explained that he had not yet been chosen a testing field to conduct the exam, so it was time for him to leave. Suddenly turning around, he said that Bong Pasan was supposed to be his prey, and this made him very angry. Based on this, Lady understood that the path of the protagonist killer would indeed be difficult, because he had very influential competitors. Meanwhile, events continued to take place at Basong's residence. The wife of the deceased Pasan was talking to someone and said that she understood absolutely everything. It turned out that she was informed that the killers could not be apprehended, which enraged her, and she began to destroy everything in her path. The butler decided to calm her down and came closer, but she didn't want to listen to anyone. Jang Ming now understood that without Pasan, her life would be harder, but she still had to catch the killer to get revenge. At the same time, the investigators discussed among themselves that it seemed like the Black Army and the mysterious killer had some kind of disagreement, and Pasan had been showing excessive arrogance for the past 2 years, and would be taken out by the Blue Cave organization sooner or later. They decided to take advantage of their conflict and force Bong to cooperate with them, and conflicts in such a community are like a small-scale war, which is beyond comprehension. Now there's only one lead, the mercenary boss, who probably knew something important. The mercenary boss named Kurogi was unconscious due to severe wounds, but was still breathing, and he was seriously injured but alive. In the shelter, Agent 47 healed her wounds with the help of an unusual device, and the hero understood that the world around him was filled with high-tech equipment and unusual people. He had to pass the test on the testing field, and his life still depended on others, and there was no shelter outside. Now he needed to become stronger, and perhaps the woman and the organization behind her would help him with this. Looking at his reflection, Ding Yino remembered how his uncle, who was also his employer, was killed. These memories seemed cruel and terrible to him, making him feel uneasy. Trying to calm him down, the lady only said that by entering this path, one can forget about the past, because his family and friends would think that he was dead, and the girl hoped, but Dean Eno hoped until the very end that he would not have to forget his loved ones. As it turned out, one girl who had previously helped him was still worried about the main character. She sincerely hoped that nothing had happened to Ding Yino, because she had already called him many times, but he never answered. Since his disappearance, more than 38 calls have been made, and all of them were missed because Dean Eno never answered them. At the same time, someone was holding the main character's phone and saw that many people were calling him. These were investigators, and they saw that Dean Eno was calling mostly Odnoklasniki, and it looked like that wouldn't give them anything. The man saw that his partner was worried about the missing guy, and he didn't think that he would be a key figure, and the college student who just graduated, even if he has a connection to the Blue Cave, he thinks that there is nothing special there. The smart woman thought completely differently, not forgetting Ding Yin's background, and he was previously a student at the Royal Institute and had 2 degrees in chemistry and physics. Previously, he was a test designer for the top intelligence club in the United States. A guy like this ended up being a courier, and now he's involved in this case, and there's clearly something unusual about him. However, the investigators decided to start by getting to know the people who had called the main character earlier. As a result of treatment at the shelter, Agent number 48 managed to heal 2 serious wounds and 26 minor ones. Although the girl was still interested in the young man, she wanted to know why he decided to become a courier. This question interested the young man, and he thought that the stranger was interested in him. However, if Ding Inua suddenly died, she wouldn't be upset if she didn't know the answer. The young man did not like such an impudent answer, and he decided to find out the truth. Dean Yino approached the girl and thought it was unfair for her to ask all the questions, so he decided to ask his question about number 48, but the girl was the first to ask why his wounds healed so quickly. It turned out that the young man knew that the girl would ask this question anyway, and he thought that his body had special properties. Winking, the girl suggested finding a place where they could sit down and talk about it, as she was very interested in what was happening to him. The events took place in a restaurant, where the girl wanted to know how Dean Eno managed to defeat the mercenary who interrogated him, and it turned out that the mercenary lost consciousness, and when he came to, the end was already waiting for him. Over sips of coffee, the girl became thoughtful, and her interlocutor, apparently, was hiding the truth. However, the guy insisted, claiming that there was no point in lying, and he himself was looking for answers to these questions. Losing her confidence, the woman realized that Dean himself seemed to have no idea how he had killed the soldier who had interrogated him. Indeed, he still had no answers, although his speed and strength had increased significantly. Clenching his fists, the young man felt his blood boil, as if a force was awakening within him, striving to get out. But Dean Eno was very curious to know what was happening to his body, although the girl could not answer this question. The likelihood of his body mutating on its own in the sacred land was extremely low, as occult practices did not involve anything like that. The ability to stimulate the brain's potential was related to the elder cult and their religion, and these abilities allowed them to improve their bodies. But outside of this sect, only the Red Gloves people had such abilities, and there were about 50 of them. Confident of this, the girl also assumed that sooner or later Ding Eno would meet these unusual people. Alarmed, the hero admitted that he knew nothing about it because he had never heard of anything like it before. Having stroked the guy on the head, the girl began to calm him down, claiming that there was nothing to worry about because everyone has their own secrets. Soon she stood up and headed somewhere, telling the guy to follow her, as she had something she wanted to show him. Suddenly the girl's attention was drawn to a man sitting nearby and drinking coffee. It was clear that the man was overweight, probably due to his daily consumption of coffee with excess sugar. Looking around, the guy noticed that perhaps there was someone the girl knew nearby, but she noted that she did not want to have anything to do with him. Walking down the corridor, the hero decided to find out a little about the upcoming test and invitation to the mysterious organization, since he did not want to fall into a trap. To this, the girl replied that she did not force him to follow her, since field tests are part of the selection process for new company employees, and only those who pass the test are eligible to join the Red Gloves. The only way to get into the test was to get an invitation, so the guy wanted to know what would happen if he said he didn't want to participate in the killings. Smiling, his girlfriend merely warned him that he would not be pleased with the answer. Passing by some door, the guy noticed two strange guys in unusual masks standing nearby. It turned out that these were two gatekeepers who never communicated with visitors, and the hero was no longer surprised by this, as he was getting used to the strangeness of this place. The girl, opening the huge door, hoped that everything would work out for him, because it was in this room that the demons and ghosts were located. The place they came to was called Bounty Bar, where the tasks for the Red Gloves were distributed. To get the invitation, Dean Eno will have to secure a special spot here. There were a huge number of criminals in the bar, and each of them looked at Ding Eno in surprise, assuming that he was an ordinary person. Together, they decided to go to the bar to drink something strong. The one-eyed bartender was very glad to see the girl, because they had not seen each other for a long time, the last time when she was dealing with the Order of Monkeys. The young man still did not understand how the invitation was connected with this place, but it turned out that there was a huge screen nearby. The screen displayed the world kill ranking, and the higher the star level, the more difficult it is, and, of course, the greater the reward. The Red Gloves had rules that all orders could be chosen after they appeared. There were two ways, and killing or forcing the successor to carry out the task. After successfully completing a task, people who are not members of the organization receive an invitation. The one-eyed bartender also secretly reported that Agent 48 had never seen rookies before. As it turned out, someone nearby had already completed the task and killed a person with a 3-star rating. This man was the Pharaoh, and the girl ordered him to be killed so that Ding Eno would receive his invitation. The hero was initially surprised by such a task, but realized that he really needed to complete it because he really wanted to become a killer. At this time, the classmate was shocked by the information received from the investigators because they were told that Dean Eno was involved in crimes and shot at people. This is why the investigators needed the help of the classmate, because they did not know what was happening to Dean and they needed help. The worried girl herself didn't know what to say because Dean never told her anything. But she was absolutely sure that he was not a bad person because that's how she felt. At the same time, Pharaoh announced that it was time for him to return to work because time is money. All the mercenaries understood that Pharaoh was aiming to get into the top 50 to learn the occult arts, and he took a 3-star mission, and no one present was going to challenge him. The hero, looking at his partner, could not determine whether she really wanted him to survive or just pass the test, and the intentions of these women remained a mystery. Looking at her partner, the girl asked him not to think about what she was thinking, but to take care of himself first, since there was very little time left, because Pharaoh was already leaving. Deciding to hurry, the young man made his way through the crowd to approach the Pharaoh. Smiling happily, the boy concluded that he needed to receive the mission that Pharaoh had just taken. For an experienced killer, this was a truly unusual request, and he noticed that a newbie was approaching him, and so he decided to find out his name. The young man replied that he was not exactly a newcomer and was with number 48. This was unexpected news for Pharaoh, and he saw how his goddess had just raised a glass to him, and he was too happy about such attention, but now he needed to calm down a little. At the same time, the partner realized that this guy had the upper hand and that he had a lot of bad ideas. While watching Pharaoh, the hero noticed that he was nervous, and it seemed that Fun was a famous person, which is why he was not going to give up so easily and had to teach him a lesson. That's why Ding Inua exclaimed that he was a guy dating a girl named Fun Ding. This turn of events was simply unacceptable to the lady, and she could not believe that her comrade had said this. For everyone present in the bar, this statement was truly shocking, and only the young man remained focused on his task, blowing a kiss to his beloved. The pharaoh simply could not believe it and realized that it was almost impossible. The experienced killer couldn't understand why Fun Din had to be with this guy, and if it was true, then his will would definitely not be weak. Watching Pharaoh, the young man realized that he had been silent for a long time, and therefore believed that he had done the right thing. The crowd nearby started chanting for the music in the bar to be turned off and for Pharaoh to take this guy down, because no one dared challenge Pharaoh, and everyone thought there would be something to see tonight. Extending his hand, Pharaoh said that the newcomer could attack him first. Without hesitation, the young man began the attack, realizing that their forces might be unequal, and that it was first necessary to study what abilities the pharaoh possessed. Looking at the guy, Pharaoh only thought that he was not very smart, but it was still unclear whether Fun Ding really had a relationship with him. As he approached his opponent, Ding Inua thought about getting as close as possible to grab him and knock him down. But his attack was predictable, and the enemy, using his super abilities, dodged it. Pharaoh easily counterattacked with his magical abilities, and Ding Ino was sent to the floor. Although he was in great pain, the boy was not going to give up. His determination remained unshakable. His fury was stronger than his opponent had expected, and Ding Inua rose again, continuing to attack. Pharaoh understood Ding Inua's attack methods very well and was able to successfully repel them. The young man was significantly weaker than the mighty Pharaoh, and he knew it. Every attack was devastating for Ding Inua, and he found it difficult to deal with such a strong opponent. However, Pharaoh admitted that Ding Ino is a tough guy who was able to get up from the floor and continue fighting. Realizing that it was difficult for him to continue the fight directly, the young man decided to use Fun Ding to distract his opponent. Suddenly realizing that such methods were no longer acceptable, he remembered the words of his grandfather, who told him that a real man should not be a weakling. Pharaoh, on the contrary, showed tenderness and during the fight behaved like a lady devoid of fighting spirit. Even as a child, Pharaoh was constantly insulted and humiliated because he was weak, and everyone considered it their duty to humiliate him, calling him trash. The little boy was made up and beaten because he was considered weak because he was weaker than everyone else. Watching what was happening, the bartender came to the conclusion that the main character had uttered the worst possible words, and Fun Din could not understand why the young man was doing this, because the pharaoh had become serious, and yet it would be useful for him to see the real power in the red gloves. Declaring that he would now fight seriously, Pharaoh called his snake into action using his bloody gaze ability. Using this ability, the snake attacked the young man, wrapping itself around his neck, causing him to suffocate. While the hero was in excruciating pain, Pharaoh approached from behind to deliver another blow. From the attack, Ding Yino fell onto the bar counter and realized that his body no longer obeyed him. The girl realized that Pharaoh had taken the main character's words seriously, and now she needed to somehow get out of this situation. Because this could have been the last day of Ding Yino's life because of his words directed towards the pharaoh. Without hesitation, the hero grabbed the glass of wine from the girl and declared that he was capable of resisting this guy. However, he needed to take revenge because at first glance the pharaoh looked really weak, and it seemed that he was mocking the young man. After drinking the wine, Ding Inua decided that he would never give up again and would definitely win. Then, with full determination, the hero shouted that he would prove to the pharaoh who was the real, strong one here. The wine turned out to be very spicy, causing the young man to literally emit fire from his mouth. As a result, he began to run from side to side, asking everyone to give him water to take the edge off his mouth. The pharaoh was even more irritated by this, realizing that a sharp weapon was hidden behind soft lips, and it was a glass of Fun Ding, which meant an indirect kiss, and now Ding had crossed the line of what was acceptable. The heated young man did not expect to hear that he was threatened with death, and in order for this to happen, the pharaoh had to stop teasing him. In response to these words, the enemy decided to use his strongest move and summoned a snake, which was supposed to paralyze the victim. After the snake bite, green lightning flashed through the protagonist's body, gradually paralyzing him. Immediately after the paralysis, Pharaoh struck again, seeking to end the battle and confirm his superiority, not giving the newcomer a chance to win. This was followed by a series of devastating blows that left Ding Ino unable to continue fighting. Everyone present was shocked by Pharaoh's skill, not expecting such cruelty towards a newcomer. After the last blow, Pharaoh decided to order himself a glass of wine, and Fun Din thought this blow was truly impressive. The man even blushed from such a compliment, because he really liked the girl, but he was embarrassed to express his feelings. In Pharaoh's memories, a girl appeared who asked him if he had really been bullied again. As it turned out, it was Fun Din, who did not want anyone to offend the Pharaoh, who was still inexperienced at that time, but did not want to give in. The good-natured girl explained to Pharaoh how to behave in battle, although she had not seen the young man for some time. But Fun also really wanted Pharaoh to remember everything she taught him, and then he would never be offended again. While the main character was still lying behind the bar, unconscious, gradually coming to his senses and experiencing severe pain, the guy was only able to get up with difficulty. Fun Ding watched Pharaoh closely, wondering why he was blushing like a tomato, as if he had other thoughts. However, the guy decided to ask the girl who this guy was who dared to challenge him. Seeing that he was not getting an answer, the boy asked again who, after all, this stranger was who had attacked him. Looking at the guy, Fun Din exclaimed that she was also interested in him, and that she was cooperating with him. Those present could not understand how this was possible, because they thought that Fun Ding had brought a strong man, and she knew the Pharaoh, but she still allowed a newcomer to challenge him, and she must have some interesting plans. Some of the spectators even started placing bets, and one person decided to bet 100,000 red coins that the newcomer would win. At that very moment, the hero slowly stood up and exclaimed that this fight was really good. It was at that moment that he felt the power fill him, and he could use it to defeat his enemy. Jumping from behind the bar, the guy sprang into action, eager to continue the battle. Now his determination was even stronger, and he was determined to beat up Pharaoh for his insolence. The Pharaoh laughed and declared that the boy had already gotten on his nerves, and if Fun Din objected, he would kill this newcomer. The girl, feeling indifferent, only replied that Pharaoh could do whatever he wanted. These words pleased the Pharaoh, and he immediately rushed into battle, seeking to destroy the newcomer. The battle raged, and the enemy was already very close, and trying to strike, he swung his fist straight at the hero's head. With his new abilities, Dean Eno could now see every blow from his enemy and easily dodge the attack. Thus, thanks to his skills, Pharaoh was unable to hit the young man even once. All his attacks were unsuccessful. Thanks to the enemy, the young man became much stronger and could fight back against such a strong and experienced opponent. Ding Yino landed his first blow straight into the head of the villain who dared to attack again. For the girl, this spectacle was truly pleasant, and she watched this battle with pleasure, while the others present were shocked by the protagonist's skills as they couldn't understand how this was possible. Only Pharaoh noticed that it was really funny because he was not hurt at all by the blow. Trembling from the impact, Pharaoh admitted that he had not expected such strength from a newcomer. While not far from the police station, investigators were discussing a possible suspect, a woman with red hair and a specific mask, and they were going to check all the entrances and exits of the city in full. The investigators did not even assume that the main character's classmate treated the killer, but they could still use the girl in the future. The man realized that Pasan was already dead, and the weapon they could use against the group of blue caves was in the coffin. But their organization still had a lot of strength and power, now under the leadership of his wife Jang Ming and the 3 Tigers of the Black Army. Although they had no clear leader at the moment, it was interesting to see what they planned to do next. Suddenly, the girl had an idea to take advantage of Jiang Ming and her army. Regarding the girl killer, if she belongs to the Red Gloves, then evidence was needed to start the investigation. It turns out that the Red Gloves serve the Blue Caves, because together they select the best killers around the world, and if the girl took Ding Eno with her to their lair, then tracking them will become almost impossible. Sometime later, the events took place in the Red Gloves bar, where Pharaoh was happy that the protagonist had become similar to his opponent. Suddenly the snake threw out a card. It turned out to be a mission card, which contained all the necessary information. The opponent laughed and said that the hero would have to try to take this card to win the battle. Immediately after this, Pharaoh began to deftly dodge, doing it so quickly that it was impossible to track how he moved. The opponent began to make multiple attacks, shouting that he had met many people, but none like Dean Eno, who needed to be beaten to become stronger. The young man was shocked by the stream of blows, not understanding how to dodge, because the opponent's hands moved very quickly, like whips. Deciding to develop a battle plan, the guy began to retreat, doing a backflip. The enemy smiled, realizing that the youth had noticed his use of the Fong dance in this battle. Due to the force of the blows, Dean Eno's hands literally began to burn with pain, and he did not understand what to do, because such a wound could not be quickly restored. Trying to calm down, the guy began to think that there should be a chance to defeat the villain, even if he was so strong. Even the one-eyed bartender couldn't figure out what this guy was doing and why he kept fighting. Realizing that he couldn't stop, Dean began to think that he was running out of time and could only rely on brute force. Taking off his shirt, he began to wrap his hands to protect his wounds so that the enemy would not be able to hit them. Only by getting closer could Dean deliver a blow that could defeat the villain in the fight. Unfortunately, the blow was too slow, and Pharaoh easily dodged it, having more agility than the protagonist. At that very second, the young man began to choke, holding his neck, not understanding what was happening. The hero began to see double, and he realized that something had happened to his vision, and he could no longer see normally. Pharaoh only exclaimed that this was an incredible battle, and he thought that they would play some more, and the faster the newcomer moved, the sooner the poison would reach his heart. Looking at Fun Din, Pharaoh decided to ask if he could end this battle by destroying the main character. The girl laughed and just waved her hand, indicating that he could very well finish off this guy. For the enemy, this was good news, and he realized that the moment had come to act. As he unleashed his strongest blow, he shouted that he was about to receive the touch of death. From such a powerful blow, the young man felt as if his soul was leaving his body, and he would never be able to fight again, as if he was preparing to lose his life. The guy began to see hallucinations, as if he was falling into an abyss surrounded only by flames. An unknown entity was telling him to give it a minute of attention because he had lost again. Resigned to defeat, Ding Yino admitted that his opponent was stronger and he did not know what to do. Attempts to deceive him were rejected, and he saw no way out. The entity didn't like this. It didn't understand how one could just give in, forgetting about its grievance. Feeling furious with all his might, the boy shouted that he would never forget his insult and wanted revenge, but now everything was lost. Suddenly, Dean Yino came to life and shouted that the game was just beginning and it was time for him to act. The inner essence in him wanted to show what he was capable of and what power was in his body. The crowd of people around were jubilant, and no one could understand whether the battle would continue, because it seemed that the pharaoh had destroyed the newcomer. In the opinion of the enemy, everything was already over, and he ordered the hero to surrender because there was no longer a chance of victory. The unknown entity inside the boy continued to insist that this was not the end of the battle. Pharaoh was surprised by this turn of events because he could not understand how the guy could continue to speak. Soon after, a simple blow was delivered that easily caused the opponent to feel pain. Under the blow, the villain flew several dozen meters to the side, forcing the crowd of people to disperse. There were people standing nearby who were extremely surprised that the poison did not affect the newcomer, although it had previously been fatal to everyone. For Pharaoh, this was a truly impressive surprise, and he could not understand how this was even possible. As the battle continued, the enemy before him became increasingly stronger. Rising from the floor, Pharaoh shouted, demanding that Dean Yino reveal his true potential and display his full strength. The next stage of the battle was the use of bonds to stop the enemy. The stunned villain could not believe that he had been stopped and could not figure out how to continue the battle. Out of powerlessness, the pharaoh could not even raise his hand, since it was tied by the main character's hand. The next step was to deliver a powerful blow to knock the opponent off his feet. The blow actually affected the pharaoh, causing him to fall to the floor and punch through it, leaving a deep dent. Everyone present realized that the newcomer looked completely different, as he was able to deliver such a powerful blow that he broke the ground. The frightened pharaoh decided to find out where this young man got such strength from and who he was. The hero decided not to respond to this and prepared for the final blow to end the battle. Feeling afraid, Pharaoh tried to block to avoid the final blow. Gathering all his strength, the hero carried out the third stage of the battle, using the Iron Mountain Strike. This powerful blow was a push from his entire body, which made his strength much greater than usual. The spectators were delighted with such an impressive battle and watched the events with pleasure. Suddenly, after the impact, a strange steam appeared and began to disappear. The young man seemed to be exhausted and began to slowly fall to the floor because he could no longer continue the battle. Seeing this, Pharaoh was shocked, not understanding how his opponent lost consciousness. Those present simply watched as Dean Yino lost consciousness, not understanding what was happening. The opponent was just trying to understand why his opponent stopped his strike and did not finish the battle. The spectator who had bet 100,000 red coins was delighted, noting that this battle was truly worth the cost. After a short pause and reflection, the bartender decided to ask Fun Din a couple of questions. He wondered if the girl could withstand a fight with Ding Yino. Her reaction was a slight grin, implying that the newcomer was not yet strong enough to compete with her. However, this did not bring back the most pleasant memories for the bartender. He noticed that the guy was using some unusual boxing techniques, including the figure eight, which was rare. Fun Din called on everyone to return to their seats in an attempt to calm the situation. At this time, the mysterious observer, enjoying hot coffee, closely followed the events. Suddenly, the bartender had memories of his childhood when he used to hunt in the forest. He preferred to hunt wild boars, skillfully camouflaging himself in trees. With one well-aimed shot, he could easily deal with huge boars. For the boy, he was only 12 years old. It was an important moment to kill his first animal while hunting. He approached the boar with delight to check if it was alive. But the boar turned out to be alive and immediately attacked the boy. The little hero was very scared, but fortunately, someone managed to shoot the boar and save him. It turned out that it was his grandfather, who always took care of his grandson. The old man urged the boy not to regard hunting as a game, but to see it as a battle for life and death. If the victim is not killed immediately, then in the future, no one except grandfather will be able to protect Dangino. This mysterious creature emerged from a huge fire that engulfed the entire forest, and its rage consumed the truth. The remnants of the tribe created spears of vengeance, and cracks appeared on the walls of faith. Ino really was. When kings with the sword cannot draw blood from the bodies and hearts of their victims, then the blood of kings will be spilled to the last drop. Every king must get what he deserves, because if he is unable to defeat his victim, then that victim will defeat him. In light of this, the essence's understanding that the guy doesn't have much time left becomes obvious. At the same time, Fundin noticed that the newcomer had woken up and decided to ask if he had had nightmares in his sleep. She asked this question because the guy had been talking in his sleep earlier. The girl was surprised by this turn of events, not expecting the hero to wake up so quickly. After waking up, Funding noticed that Ding Inua had become agitated and was acting unusually. All this time, the hero ignored the girl, and she did not understand why he was doing this. However, the worried girl still decided to follow the guy to find out why he left the room. In fact, she followed him to help him because she saw that he was very weak. The hero refused help because he wanted to cope on his own and did not want to feel defenseless. At this time, events continued to develop at the Pasan residence. The investigators decided to come to the residence to find out if Jang Ming could help them. The guards began to apologize to the officers, explaining that Madam was too tired due to family responsibilities and asked to return the next day. Having shown her ID, the girl reminded the police of their powers under Article 92 of the federal law, which allows them to conduct a search at any time. A more gentle officer stated that they had come on important business and required access inside. However, the investigator decided to pass on the note to Jiang Ming. The alarmed servant agreed to deliver the note to Madam. The next day, Fundin told the guy that they have a ticket for the sick Bova, whose target is in Dak City, and Ding Ino must kill Hawken before he does. So they have to complete the competition with the pharaoh by killing his target. Despite everything that was happening, the girl decided to give the guy a t-shirt, claiming that it would suit him. The guy didn't like this behavior, and he threw the t-shirt right in Fundin's face, ordering her to stop this fun. The young man understood that his partner was playing with his life and had no intention of leaving, and now Fundin could kill him right here. However, the girl suddenly grabbed him and covered his mouth, warning him not to risk his health. Whether it's a trick or a request, the killers must survive by any means necessary. Having gained the upper hand, the guy declared that he did not consider Fundin his coach, since she had not helped him in any way before. This only made the girl laugh, and she smiled as she lay on the bed. However, she could not stand the insult and hit the guy hard, causing him unbearable pain. Saying goodbye with an air kiss, Fundin said that she would wait for him in the banquet hall, stressing that he should dress up and stop crying because he looked like a beggar. At Pashin's residence, events developed further as investigators tried to enter the building. The lady who owned the residence decided that the investigators could still get through. But the guards immediately demanded that they surrender their weapons, despite their police status. The girl did not fall for this trick, knowing that only the police superintendent had the right to collect weapons. When the guard tried to stop her, he didn't like the way he responded. The man quickly grabbed him, warning him that he was lucky that he had not touched his partner, otherwise he would have had one less hand. The security guards called for backup to deal with the situation. The policeman reminded the security guard to be more careful and gentle with the lady. However, the man turned out to be too rude, and now the guard found it hard to breathe, lying on the floor. The butler insisted that the guests' weapons must remain under guard, as this was the rule in the Pasan residences. However, the man was sure that they did not pose a threat to Miss Jiang Ming, but it was still necessary to surrender the weapons. The polite investigator handed over his gun and suggested changing this rule for special cases. After surrendering their weapons, the butler invited them inside, assuring them that their request would be taken into account. Meanwhile, events unfolded in a restaurant where the main character was sitting with Fundin. The girl placed an order for a snack, and the guy looked around. He doubted whether the killers looked as described, since there were ordinary people around. In fact, the building wasn't just for murderers. Anyone looking for a good time could rent a room there. However, Dean Eno was surprised by the existence of the Red Glove Bar and asked if they were afraid that they might be exposed, and yet without access cards, ordinary visitors only see what they're supposed to. To ordinary people, it was just a 5-star hotel with nothing special about it. After hearing this, the boy began to realize that killers could also run a side business. However, everything here belonged to the Blue Caves organization, including this building and even the Red Gloves. This made the hero think that the most powerful organizations in the world are organizations of killers. It makes sense, and the rich and powerful should control everything around them. When the waiter approached the hero, he accidentally spilled a glass of drink on him. The regretful man immediately began to apologize to the protagonist, explaining that he had been careless. Fundin only advised the hero to return from the toilet quickly, otherwise he would be left without food. As soon as the hero entered the toilet, the spirit of ape appeared in front of him, which greatly frightened the guy. The monkey apologized for frightening him and explained that she just wanted to talk to him. After handing over the letter from Jang Ming, a strange middleman approached the girl and asked her not to ask questions about the letter. This mysterious stranger was only a murderer. His goal was only to kill. Jang Ming wanted to know who he would kill and for whom. And it turned out that he would kill those who stood in the way of his master. For the girl, this news was a pleasant surprise, but she realized that her lover was no longer with her. That was why the stranger came to meet Jang Ming, who was now his new mistress. Investigators came to the deceased Pashan's wife and began interrogating her. The lady was interested in what the police wanted from her and asked about it right away. It turned out that the police came to find out the circumstances of her husband's death, while on one of the floors of the Red Gloves events were taking place. The pharaoh was delighted to receive a message from Din stating that everything was going according to plan. Approaching the table in a restaurant, the guy was surprised to see that all the plates were empty, as if they had been licked clean to the last crumb. It turned out that the lady had already left, and the waiter decided to report this. The excited man also said that the guest ate everything that was on the table before leaving. After completing the interrogation, the police left the residence. They didn't fully understand what Jiang Ming meant when she spoke of her husband's death, but they were clear that sooner or later they would find out the truth. The sheet of paper given to the investigators noted that the Red Glove people were difficult to identify. The pharaoh entered the office, guarded by his guards. The man was shocked and doubted the veracity of the information about the existence of the White Gloves. The stranger sitting in the chair exclaimed that if Pharaoh had heard of them, then he must have something else to learn. The stranger turned out to be Andy Fat Cat, who explained that the White Gloves are the enforcers of the Red Gloves, and the Pharaoh has a power that does not belong to him. As soon as this was said, Pharaoh's snake began to show aggression. One of the warriors could not understand what was happening and why the snake was attacking him, and yet it turned out that only 50 Red Glove assassins had achieved the mastery of the Holy Lands, and whoever commits forbidden acts must be punished. Snapping his fingers, Andy Fat Cat announced that he would give Pharaoh a chance. Since the snake was keeping a close eye on the cocky guy for Andy Fat Cat, any of his tricks could be discovered, and a bomb was planted inside the snake that could destroy him. His red-haired goddess reminded him of an old friend he was very close with, so he decided to keep an eye on her. The airport announced to passengers flying to the city of Minshu to pay attention to their flight. The protagonist's friends thought that their classmates' decision to go on an exchange was excellent, and after arriving, they needed to have a good rest before classes started. This advice really made the girl happy, and she agreed with her friends. Caring friends understood that living alone in an unfamiliar city was not easy, so they asked her to call if anything happened. The girl's plane had already arrived, and it was time for her to fly away, so she decided to say goodbye to her friends. While flying away on the plane, the classmate thought about where exactly Ding Eno had disappeared to. At that time, the young man was sailing on a ship, enjoying the beautiful view of the sea. Approaching the guy, Fun Din decided to joke with him, saying that they were almost there, and he still had time to swim in the sea. The guy joked in response to this comment, saying that his companion should be careful, because he could accidentally throw her overboard too. Over a cocktail, the hero pondered whether his target, Hawken, could really be an ordinary doctor. This doctor had a 3-star reputation and many awards, which made him especially valuable. However, his partner did not see any catch in this, and happily expected an easy mission. At this time, events were unfolding in the hospital where Kurogi was lying. Suddenly, he came to his senses and saw a doctor standing next to him. Immediately after waking up, the experienced soldier delivered a powerful blow, stunning the guards. The police, having entered, began to investigate the incident and find out the whereabouts of the prisoners, and it turned out that Kurogi attacked the doctor and escaped through the ventilation system. The ventilation hatch was open, meaning that the perpetrator was currently in the hospital's ventilation system. Even though the military knew that Kurogi was wounded and would not be able to get far, they decided to report the incident to headquarters. Kurogi's guards immediately contacted the investigators looking into the incident, and the girl was furious, not understanding what was happening. The wounded soldier, with his last strength, reported that Kurogi had escaped and all the policemen in the hospital were dead. These were the soldier's last words, and despite being called to headquarters, help arrived too late to deal with Kurogi. Some time later, events continued in the city of Dak. The taxi driver told the hero and the girl that rich people like to relax here because of the many interesting entertainments. Looking at the couple, the taxi driver noticed that he knew why they had come. The taxi driver joked and added that it was thanks to passengers like them that he had such a luxurious car. Despite this, he promised to be polite to tourists and asked for 120 yuan for the trip. A few minutes later, the young man and the girl checked into the hotel, and he watched the city from the balcony. Looking at what was happening, the guy felt that the spirit of crime was hovering over the entire city. Unable to bear this, Fundin hit her partner, reminding him that there was no need to be so serious because it was just dirty air. She then began to drag the guy along with her, explaining that the first step to murder was to study the area. Suddenly, someone started knocking hard on the door, as if trying to enter the room. It turned out that there was a huge courier standing behind the door who saw an attractive girl with red hair. There was no killer, there was no attempt on the life of the main character and his companion, just an ordinary parcel delivery man. These suitcases contained magical devices that would help Fun Ding and Ding Yino continue their work. The girl handed one of the cases to her partner and gave the password 2333. The hero immediately decided to open the case and examine the contents, including the pistol, knife, and many other mysterious objects. For him, these were truly amazing technologies. He had never seen anything like this before. Suddenly, a voice came from the strange device, claiming that the newcomer should not be surprised, since the stranger creates things that amaze everyone. Laughing, Ding Yino took out his watch, wanted to find out who was contacting him through it. It turned out that this stranger was capable of instantly taking over all of his assets and personal data, as well as forcing him to sell himself for the rest of his life, so he should have shown respect during the conversation. After checking the weapon, the girl warned to be careful with it, as it was really powerful. Their assistant decided to get back to business and said that he was monitoring all information about Hawken. This doctor was really strange, so he urged the team to be more careful, because anything could be expected from this doctor. Looking at the technology, the young man suggested that the word strange might indicate that his partner did not know everything about him. It turned out that their assistant was having a hard time working because he was a little hungry, which made it difficult for him to concentrate on the tasks. Suddenly, the young man discovered that this doctor was working for an organ trafficking organization and was using hospitals to obtain and sell them. Armed with pistols, Fundin exclaimed that it was time for them to move, as the assassination game had officially begun. The clever assistant began using the drone to investigate the area where their target was located. According to the instructions, the building contained red zones covered with special materials. Therefore, it was necessary to infiltrate this building and conduct an inspection, but Fundin warned that they should be careful, as many assassins had failed in this mission. The hero was very surprised by this turn of events. He thought that his partner would go with him, but she did not do this, explaining that the newcomer needed to do all the dirty work, and she was currently on vacation. Blowing him a kiss, the girl exclaimed that he would succeed, even though he was a cowardly boy. Sometime later, the hero finally decided to enter the room, and at first glance it looked like an ordinary hospital, so it was unclear where to start. Seeing one of the workers, Dean immediately understood what he needed to do in this situation. Having entered the utility room, he dressed up as a janitor and thought that he had never expected that he would ever be forced to act like a spy. Walking through the corridors of the hospital, the young man continued to explore the area. Entering the elevator, he immediately saw that the elevator could take him to floors B2 and B4, but the floor he needed was not there. In the elevator, he decided to go up to one of the floors, but noticed that the place he needed was nowhere to be found. Still, it was necessary to continue acting, so he decided to walk along one of the floors to inspect the area. Without hesitation, the hero entered one of the offices and began to look around, looking for clues. As he continued to move forward, he kept thinking that the elevator must be inside this office. But unfortunately, this elevator was locked, and next to it was Scott's lock, which required a key card to unlock. Meanwhile, the cube's security guard noticed that a cleaner was wandering behind the forbidden door and called security there. One of the guards immediately responded and headed to the appropriate office. The hero was surprised by this turn of events and realized that the surveillance group had reacted quite quickly because he had just approached the door and had already attracted their attention. The angry security guard turned to the cleaner and asked what he had forgotten there. The worried guy explained that he was responsible for sanitation on floor B1, and this door was on the list of dirty ones, and he wanted to wash it. The man insulted the cleaner and said that cleaning this door was prohibited, so he should leave. Realizing that the first plan didn't work, Dean Eno began to think about other options. Meanwhile, in an abandoned building, Pharaoh couldn't understand why they couldn't meet in a more elegant place. It turned out that Fun Din chose this place because that's what they do in movies, and killers conduct their business in such abandoned places. Although this did not particularly please Pharaoh, he understood that it was true. Earlier, the girl's assistant gave her a task map, and it was really useful for her because it was very detailed. Pharaoh was worried, trying to understand why Fun Ding would provide Ding Yino with such equipment if the task card had already been obtained, and he wanted to understand why she was dragging this guy in. The girl understood that this provided double security, and if Dean Eno failed the mission and did not get the task card, he could still get it by killing the opponent's target. At this time, the girl received a new message, which she was going to answer, and Pharaoh felt jealousy towards the main character. Ding Yin decided to call the girl to find out where she was, and Fun Ding answered without hesitation that she was on a date. The hero realized that he would not be able to do anything in the Hawken Hospital during the day, so he decided to try to do something in the evening. The guy also needed some extra equipment, so he was going to ask Fatso for help. To prevent him from escaping, the girl used a stun gun on him to show him that running away was pointless. Thanks to her technology, Fun Din had her own security measures that allowed her to keep the protagonist close to her until the end. During Ding Yino's shutdown, Fun Ding implanted an 80,000-volt tracking sensor into his body, and if she finds the boy suspicious, she can shock him at any time. This only made the guy even more angry, and he asked the girl if she really thought he was such a coward. The partner explained that she brought him to the House of the Red Gloves to complete a task, and if he could not do it, he would be eliminated. These rules were unbreakable, and the hero understood that he must follow the instructions of the mentor. After turning off the call, the girl thought that perhaps she had been too strict with the guy during the conversation. The pharaoh became very angry when he saw how the newcomer treated Fun Din. The man wanted the girl he liked to finish off the guy while he could eliminate Hawken himself. Suddenly, the lady decided to provide the pharaoh with a card so that he could study the profiles of his people. These profiles noted that since the Red Gloves began targeting him, dozens of his bodyguards had been replaced, meaning many of them had been killed during this time. In that case, Pharaoh couldn't understand why Hawken was still alive. It turned out that the secret lay in a man named Bai Pekhen. This bodyguard had been killing everyone who had been sent to kill Hawken for the past year, and it was quite surprising since he had always remained alive. This guard was known to be a martial arts master. Fun Din decided to open his file to show who Bai Pekhen was. The determined girl was going to meet him this evening to get to know him better. Pharaoh also reported that he was asked to hand over a case containing something very secret. The girl's devoted fan assured that he will always protect Fun Din, even at the cost of his own life. The lady was pleasantly surprised by such responsiveness and warned him to be careful. In fact, she was more interested in the case that was nearby, as she expected to find a new weapon in it. Opening the case, the girl discovered new biomechanical hands in it. This discovery upset Fun Din a little, as she had already become accustomed to her old hands. To upgrade her body, she had to remove her old mechanical arms. After the hands were removed, it turned out that the girl's real hands were badly damaged. Looking at her old hands, the girl realized that she had to sacrifice something to get something new. She studied the new mechanical arms with interest and tried to put them on. However, as soon as the hands were put on, Fun Din felt an enormous pain, as if her body was engulfed in electricity. The fusion with her new mechanical arms caused her unbearable pain, and she found it extremely difficult to bear. In any case, thanks to her new arms, Fun became much stronger and could break through a concrete wall with her bare hands. As soon as the pain passed, the girl began to remember what had happened to her earlier, and these memories brought incredible pain that was impossible to forget. The events took place in a building that looked like a church, where many people were standing right above the girl and waiting for something. A mysterious man in armor approached the girl and began to talk about how after the Lord leaves his mark on her, she will become one of the saints. With the seal of the Lord on her body, she no longer has to be human, because with the seal, an ordinary person becomes a saint. The girl will have to fight the cruel world together with thousands of members of the Sanctuary Alliance. Thanks to the ceremony, Fun Din possessed this seal and became one of the saints. Meanwhile, events continued to occur near the building where Hawken was located. The determined young man was in a garbage truck and suddenly jumped into the bushes to remain unnoticed. While he was in the bushes, all he could think about was that he was the first killer to wear a wetsuit instead of shirt. As soon as the camera turned away from the place near which the main character was located, running away quickly, the guy immediately began to move further in order to remain unnoticed. Not far from the scene of the incident, there was also a van into which strange boxes were being loaded. The men discussed among themselves that this time they would make a lot of money, but they realized that all the money could go to the boss, and they could pass it by. One of the people I was talking to had a plan that they couldn't screw up, because then they wouldn't get the money. Suddenly, One of the men saw two silhouettes approaching, and he immediately realized that there were two people nearby. As it turned out, it was Pharaoh and Fun Din, and the task map was really useful for them because even the gadgets couldn't find the secret entrance. The men were not happy with such guests and decided to stop them by pointing a gun at the two strangers. The mercenaries were going to capture two strangers and take them to the doctor to get some money. At the same time, events continued to take place in the hospital, where the main character had already begun to move towards his desired goal. With all his might, he kicked the hospital bed right into the door to enter the elevator. The young man also didn't forget to wave at the camera so that he would be noticed, and security entered the room. The hero only told the hospital patients that they should close the door and hide because it would be very hot in this hospital now. There were many oxygen tanks near the security office, but the men did not notice this because they were trying to run towards the intruder. Watching the guards, Dean Eno decided to greet them and pointed his gun straight at the oxygen tanks to shoot them. A precise shot caused an incredibly powerful explosion caused by oxygen tanks. Coming closer to the largest guard, the hero only said that he had previously said that he would return here again. With the help of the explosion, the young man was able to easily get into the elevator because he wanted to go up to another floor. But as it turned out, the elevator had only two buttons, with floors B1 and B2. Dean just didn't understand why there were only two buttons on the elevator, because he was currently on floor B1, and if he stayed here any longer, he would be turned into human mincemeat. The alarm had already been sounded on the second floor, and all the guards began to move to get rid of the intruder. The guy was already prepared for such an outcome of events, but he understood that if he had known that everything would turn out this way, he would have definitely taken more weapons with him. And alas, he forgot about it. In any case, there was no need to be nervous because all that was needed was to get out of a bad situation. As soon as the elevator door opened, the guards immediately started shooting at it, trying to finish off the intruder right in the elevator. At that very second, some strange jars started flying out of the elevator, and the security guards couldn't figure out what they were. These cans were flashbang grenades, which helped the young man distract a large number of his opponents. All the guards were stunned and blinded, making them susceptible to attack. Meanwhile, events continued to unfold near the secret entrance. Pharaoh decided to ask Fun Din how her friend was doing, and if the video surveillance system wasn't glitching, she could tell that he was holding up well and was able to break through the encirclement with the help of flash grenades. Thanks to his agility and skill, the young man was able to get through a huge number of guards without a single scratch. There were so many opponents in the building that he even started to sweat, but he couldn't do anything, and it was either him or them. Looking around, the young man saw something amazing that he had not suspected at all. The room he found himself in turned out to be a real laboratory, where there were many people in strange flasks. Coming closer, the hero could not determine whether these were really all objects for organ transplantation. Looking at the inscription nearby, he realized that these flasks still contained living people. So Dean couldn't figure out what exactly Hawken had planned for these people. Suddenly, some sounds were heard from afar, which made the hero be vigilant. Taking out his pistol, he pointed it in the direction from which the sounds were coming and demanded that the one hiding behind the wall come out. As it turned out, they were just doctors who begged him not to shoot, claiming that they were not guilty of anything. At first glance, they really did seem like doctors, raising their hands and pretending that they had nothing to do with what was happening. Nearby, next to one of the doctors, there was a security guard who was ready to take action. Without thinking, the villain snatched the gun from the protagonist's hands, stunning him with this unexpected action, and the young man was shocked, as he did not expect such a turn of events at all. Suddenly, all the medics joined the attack, and Ding Inu couldn't believe his eyes, and he never thought that the medical staff would fight against him. At the same time, Pharaoh was surprised that Hawken turned out to be much more dangerous than he had assumed. In a year, he killed fewer people than this doctor did in one day. All this was done for the sole purpose of profit. The lady decided to call a train to continue her journey. The guy still believed that not everyone was willing to do anything for profit. At least not everyone was like them. As it turns out, Pharaoh is still trying to pay off his debt to the girl, but she's not at all who he thought he was, and she saved him in order to use this for her own purposes. Fun Din never intended to deceive anyone, especially Pharaoh, since he knew her past. At this time, the main character continued his fight and had already defeated the first doctor. The second target turned out to be a girl, and she also fought skillfully, using a scalpel. All the other doctors in the room were scared and kept saying they didn't want to die. The alarmed man screamed that he was innocent and just an assistant, and he claimed that he could be useful and asked Dean Eno not to kill him. After listening to the doctor, the young man decided to spare him, since he was the last and most cowardly. On another floor, a security guard reported to Mr. Hawken that they had discovered several intruders in corridors B1 and B, as well as in tunnels B3. All security was completely destroyed, and they knew nothing about areas B2 and B4, since there were no surveillance cameras there. The concerned guard wanted to know what to do as the intruders in Tunnel B3 were using transport and were quite close. The doctor realized that the only way out of the situation was to turn to Mr. Bay. This turned out to be true, as one of the strongest fighters remained, who always guarded Dr. Hawken. The clever mercenary suggested turning off the elevator for B2 to B1 and heading to area B3 himself. One of the surviving doctors began to provide assistance to the victims and look for the necessary medications. The wounded hero noticed that the doctor was removing some strange device and asked what it was. Feeling great fear, the doctor explained that this device was developed by Mr. Hawken and is capable of activating a person's hidden potential in a short time. Understanding the risks, the boy asked the doctor to inject himself with the drug to make sure it was effective. The doctor did not want to agree, realizing that it could be dangerous for the patient's life. Under threat, Dean stood his ground, demanding that the doctor make a choice, the drug or the bullet. The doctor made his choice and administered an experimental drug that enhances human strength. The drug really worked, and the guy felt that his strength had increased significantly. Looking at his hand, the guy was no longer worried. He felt full of strength. The smart guy asked the doctor not to look at him like that. Even if he became Superman, Dean would be able to defeat him. Thus, the young man agreed to have the drug injected into his body. The pain was unbearable, and Dean Yino could hardly hold back his screams. It turned out that one patient can be given a maximum of 5 milligrams of the drug, but the doctor gave the main character 200 milligrams, which could have led to a fatal outcome due to the instability of the drug. Despite his strange state of health, the young man felt that the drug had begun to work. The doctor began to treat the main character's wounds. The worried doctor couldn't understand how the boy survived, given the failed experiments. Looking at the man in front of him, the doctor realized that the patient's body was beginning to mutate, which could lead to the creation of a monster. Trembling with fear, the doctor treated the wounds of a patient who watched him with a pistol in his hand. The doctor explained that the wound on the arm was minor, but the wounds throughout the body were serious and required immediate treatment or death could occur. The hero decided to leave, saying that he did not have time. Addressing the doctor, the guy assured that he was not going to kill the person who helped him. Yino approached the elevator. He couldn't figure out why he couldn't call the elevator. It turned out that the elevator call mechanism was damaged. This irritated the young man, as he did not understand why the mercenaries were shooting at the elevator, which led to the mechanism breaking down. Because the mercenaries couldn't get out of here without being able to get up to the exit. Dean had explosives in his backpack, so he knew he had to think carefully about his next steps first. Also, what was strange was that Hawken hadn't sent people to that floor yet, and perhaps he didn't have a full picture of the situation due to the lack of cameras, and therefore wasn't confident in his actions. As the hero got closer to Hawken, the enemy became stronger, and so the elite stood next to the target. Another possibility is that Zone B3 was also attacked, and perhaps it was the Pharaoh. At the same time, Fun Din and the Pharaoh were moving through the tunnels towards the entrance to the sector where Hawken was located. When the team arrived at Sector B3, they were met by a large number of armed soldiers. The experienced mercenaries kept a close eye on the personnel, armed and ready for action, as they needed to develop an effective plan. One of the mercenaries made a hand gesture, signaling the start of the attack. After the signal to attack, all soldiers began firing at the train car, trying to hit targets that had penetrated the sector. In fact, Fun Din was already right on top of the train and began to gradually eliminate the mercenaries, catching them off guard. Some of the mercenaries literally begged for mercy, claiming that they had nothing to do with the attack on the uninvited guests. However, the mercenary girl didn't care and easily destroyed the last soldier. The Pharaoh was impressed that the protagonist was able to reach Zone B2, and so he wanted to ask Fun Din if she trained him, but the girl only replied that it was their little secret. At that time, the young man remained on guard and prepared himself for the fact that at any moment mercenaries could enter the laboratory to fight him. The brave warrior continued to hold his pistol at the ready, prepared for any turn of events. After a few minutes of waiting, the guy felt that fatigue had overtaken him, realizing that he had already spent too much time in this room, but the mercenaries still had not started their action, and now it was his turn. Turning to the surviving doctor, Dean invited him to help open the door. With a trembling hand, the doctor began to gradually enter the code to unlock the door. The protagonist continued to insist that the lab worker enter the code as quickly as possible in order to move forward. So the code was entered and the door began to open gradually. What was behind the door greatly surprised the young man, and he could not believe his eyes. The doctor immediately fell to his knees and began to justify himself, claiming that they were forced to act on Hawken's orders. The villain literally begged to be spared, but the young man didn't care and shot the culprit. Because in the other room, there were a lot of girls who were taken hostage. These girls were still children who were locked in this room and experimented on. Raising his pistol, the hero began to calm the girls, assuring them that he would be able to get them out of this situation. To make his words sound more convincing, the hero decided to put away the gun. One of the girls decided to approach the stranger and asked if he had come here to kill them. This question really shocked the guy, and he didn't understand why the girls thought so. Looking at the little girls, Dean said that they could discuss this later, but for now they needed to leave this place as soon as possible. Remembering that he had killed many guards, the guy first decided to clean up a bit and close the door. After 20 minutes, the door opened again, but the young man was very tired, although he wanted to save the girls, telling them that it was time to go. The girls began to leave the room, and Dean asked them not to look back, as there were many bodies nearby. Fearing the consequences, the young man also blocked their view of the horror they had left behind, telling them not to turn around. Walking past a large pile of bodies, Dean said that these people had simply laid down to sleep and were doing fine. Now the main thing was to get out of the room, so the hero tried to open the elevator with his own hands. Fundin stood next to the entrance to Sector B3. Feeling the approach of enemies, the girl pulled out her blade, which was located right in her biomechanical prosthesis. With her new blade, Lady easily cut through the huge metal door that stood in front of them. The thick metal was easily cut through by the super strong blade, and now they could enter a new sector. Unfortunately, there were security guards nearby who immediately started shooting when they saw that strangers had entered the building. The soldiers did not know what kind of enemy had come and saw no chance of victory. Using parts of the metal door as a shield, the intruders entered Sector B3 and began to attack. None of the guards present were able to hit the super fast opponents, who had already destroyed half of the team. It turned out that the elevator had been activated and someone was slowly ascending to the floor of Sector B3. He was a mysterious mercenary who was the strongest warrior in Hoken. Entering the room, the guy immediately noticed that his enemies looked pretty funny. This turn of events pleased the pharaoh because he saw that a hero had appeared and they were very eager to fight him. While the young man was doing everything he could to save the children in the elevator shaft, he put one of the girls on his shoulders and climbed up the cable at the same time. The captive girls doubted that this guy could help them, but they understood that they had no choice but to go with him. They were afraid that if they resisted this guy, he might kill them. Sometime later, all the girls were safe, and the hero asked them to wait. The guy explained that it was better for the innocent girls to stay here in safety until he cleared the air. First, he needed to get into the elevator to get to the next floor. After the guy started to open the door with a knife to enter the room. After a crack appeared in the doorway, the smart guy immediately threw grenades. The guard were truly surprised by the sudden appearance of the grenades, as they did not understand where they came from. Thanks to the main character's intelligence, he was able to sneak into the room and attack his enemies. Entering the room, he easily neutralized several guards located near the elevator. However, seeing another opponent who was different from the previous ones, the guy was shocked by this turn of events. Not far from the enemy stood Pharaoh and Fundin, which surprised the hero even more. The enemy was truly glad that all his opponents had gathered and were ready to begin the battle. The strongest opponent immediately assumed that he would be attacked by a group. But it turned out that the Pharaoh's main opponent was the main character, which made this battle even more serious for the mercenary. Laughing, the protagonist exclaimed that his opponent was Fundin. This was a surprise for the girl, as she did not understand why the newcomer decided that she was his opponent. Noticing that his opponents were busy, Dean Eno decided to try to leave the room, but a gun was immediately aimed at him to prevent him from leaving. Looking at these guards, the guy realized that the guards on this floor were stronger than on B2, and even after his attack, many enemies were still able to remain on their feet. The stronger opponent ordered the guards to hold Dean while he fought the other two opponents. These words greatly angered the pharaoh, and he considered his opponent to be overly arrogant. Using a poisonous touch, the skilled killer decided to defeat his opponent with one blow. However, the battle was not as easy as Pharaoh expected, and he received a strong blow right in the stomach. This powerful blow was impressive, and Killer could not even understand how this could happen. The enemy only said that it was better for the Pharaoh to remain on Earth, otherwise he would end up dead. Even the snake urged the Pharaoh to listen to the enemy and not move, in order to see the true strength of this woman. In fact, the opponent wanted to fight the girl, because she was the star of this confrontation. For Funding, this move was really impressive, and she was amazed, but she also knew that this move would not work against her. The clever scoundrel knew that the girl's aura belonged to metal, and this technique would not be able to harm her. To counter such a strong opponent, fire is necessary because fire melts metal, which is why the fifth form of fire technique was used. Rapidly approaching the lady, the enemy did everything possible to carry out an attack. Fun was prepared for this, and also used a strike using the metal technique. Their attacks clashed, but the girl understood that her opponent was really very strong. After the blow, a fog appeared, and it was clear how the blow affected the girl. Luckily, she wasn't seriously injured, but she was in a bit of pain and didn't expect such a powerful blow. The enemy made no secret of his strength. He sensed the girl's energy, which was stronger than anyone he had ever met, and he warned Fun that if she fought him and won, then Hoken would be her next target. At this time, the girls continued to listen to everything that was happening from the elevator shaft and understood that explosions were happening, but everything remained calm, and they did not understand how much longer they would have to wait. The little girls understood that there were explosions going on in the room and that they would have to fight, but they did not know how long they would have to stay there. One of the brave girls decided that they had better go down, and if their savior won, then nothing would happen to them, and the enemies would not be able to do anything because they would say that they had been kidnapped. Realizing that they had spent a long time here, each of the girls realized that they did not even have the money to live normally in the city. At this time, the main character continued to fight, surrounded by a large number of guards who did not give him a chance to escape. The trained mercenaries were armed with daggers and could attack at any moment. The tired hero understood that his opponents were ready to fight without weapons, as if they were afraid to hurt him. And then suddenly the villains began their attack, grabbing knives and ready to attack. Luckily, the guy was able to easily fend off the attack of the first guard who tried to stab him with a knife. The battle was a real test for the young man, as he was attacked by several opponents at once. There were too many enemies, and they were stronger than those he had faced on B2, and D knew he had to get out of here while his team was still fighting the strongest enemy. Otherwise, he would not be able to save the 4 children trapped in the elevator shaft. The battle on the fields of Fu Din continued, and the most powerful opponent dealt the strongest blows aimed at defeating the girl. For the villain, these skills were truly impressive, as he could not understand how Lady could stop his attacks with her bare hands. Tired but proud of her skills, the girl realized that her opponent was truly strong. His martial art involved manipulating the energy in his body, much like loading the powder chamber of a cannon. First, the cannon is loaded with gunpowder, and then a powerful shot follows. It is strong and destructive. The mercenary was surprised that the lady had such deep knowledge of ancient martial arts, and now he understood that if such a blow was not avoided, then death was inevitable. The blow, aimed with full force, was like a shot from a huge cannon, aimed at Fun Din. The enemy only warned the girl about the inevitability of her death. The daring girl decided to impress her opponent by using her magical abilities. Using magic, she instantly moved behind her opponent. The villain constantly underestimated her, confident that she was not able to defeat him. However, the girl's words turned out to be true, and she easily moved behind the enemy's back. The enemy was an experienced and strong fighter, which allowed him to avoid the blow. The battle continued, and the heroine attacked relentlessly, wielding her blade. But with the strength of his palms, the enemy was able to stop her dagger, preventing the girl from attacking. However, having forced her to stop, the enemy began to think about the inevitability of his fate, realizing that the occult forces must be completely eradicated. The girl had no choice but to fight without the help of the dagger, which was destroyed. The warrior delivered a powerful blow, trying to end the battle. This performance shocked Fun Din, causing her to doubt herself in the face of such a strong opponent. The enemy, using magic, threw the girl back several meters, delivering his most powerful blow. After such a strong blow, Fun Ding felt like her strength had been exhausted and she was no longer able to fight, while the villain continued to advance, seeking to destroy the girl. Stopping the enemy's strike with her hands, Fun Din realized that her energy was stronger than the enemy's, and this strike was impressive, and she doubted whether she could stop it. As he gave way, the enemy wondered if these powers were truly occult, as he felt his life force draining away. It turns out that the girl had a secret, and her enemy destroyed the red gloves many times not only for protection, but also to preserve the secrets of his ancient art. This statement angered the enemy even more, and he said that the blow was too weak and he did not use his full strength. The pharaoh, meanwhile, was reflecting on the fact that he did not know that the art of his eastern sect had reached such a high level. Inua's battle and realized that their opponent, Bai Yechen, was much more skilled in this art than the protagonist. Feeling great pain, Pharaoh decided to ask the snake why it did not enter the battle, because in the form of a snake, a person is stronger than their opponents, and they have no equal. The cunning snake did not quite understand what the young man was talking about, but he claimed that mastering the techniques of the ancient art would bring him closer to the level of a god. This statement astounded the man with incredible power and the white glove title. The snake began to giggle, replying that it was indeed an interesting proposal. Despite this, the battle continued, and Fun Din used all her strength to resist the villain. Bai Yechen was a formidable opponent, and their strengths were equal, inflicting wounds on each other. For the enemy, the girl's abilities were strange, because he saw that they were harming her, but continued to fight. Raising her hands, the restless lady suggested to the enemy to let her go and take Hoken, considering her situation. The scoundrel was determined and refused to give up, declaring that he would not stop. Realizing that the enemy had no intention of ending the battle, Fun Din decided to use her magic at full power, as she had no choice but to kill him. Fatso watched what was happening and hoped to find out what kind of powers Fun Din had. Turning to the servants, the fat man instructed them to tell the knight named Blackstone that he had a task in the city of Dak. The mercenaries watched the girl's abilities in amazement. They knew that there was another red glove in front of them that had occult arts, but they didn't think that they would meet her. This statement interested one of the observers, and he decided to find out what the new humanity was. The guard explained that the hero had excellent physical fitness and special abilities, and that Dr. Hawken had studied people like him. The wounds on the protagonist's body healed quickly, and he possessed an incomprehensible physical strength, as if he were from another world. But one of the mercenaries decided to make sure of this by checking how strong the guy from the new humanity was. The villain, being naive, received a blow right in the face, overestimating his abilities. At that time, another opponent continued his attack from behind, pointing a knife straight at the young man's back. Dean managed to avoid the blow with his agility. Taking one of the enemies hostage, the hero announced his superpowers and warned that they had angered him and he intended to finish off all the guards. Looking at his backpack, Dean realized he only had 2 smoke bombs left, which had a 120-second duration, and he expected to use them within 60 seconds. But he was powerless against these 2 enemies, because they were clearly stronger. The determined young man declared that he would first deal with all the guards in the room, and then face the strongest opponents. Meanwhile, Fun Ding began to show her true strength and asked the enemy if he really wanted to know what she was capable of. Using his powerful abilities, Bayechin couldn't close his eyes to see every attack coming at him. Suddenly, there was a powerful explosion at the place where the girl was. With the help of her supernatural abilities, Lady was able to deliver multiple blows to her enemy in a split second. Fun Din decided to explain to her enemy that her ability was called Shura. Falling to his knees, the enemy could not understand how the woman he was fighting was so strong, and could not believe that he would die today. Shura technique is the fury of battle, and the more furious the battle, the faster and stronger the girl acts. As the battle continued, Fun Ding's battle fury only grew stronger, and even if the opponent had an energy shield, her hand could destroy anything. None of the magical attacks could compare to the technique that Fun Ding used. After delivering her powerful attack, Lady called for the enemy to surrender, stating that she had no intention of killing anyone else today and simply wanted her people back. The enemy could not simply accept defeat and claimed that ancient martial arts could not fail. The man's strength gradually increased, as if he had strengthened his skills and gained new abilities that he was going to demonstrate in battle. As she watched the enemy, Fun Din knew that she would not be able to hold out in battle for long, as without control over her energy, her armor was causing her great pain. The technique that Bayechin had used previously was not his strongest, and now he intended to show what the ancient arts were truly capable of. In order to demonstrate his full strength, the enemy used the full step technique and began to prepare for the fatal blow, as this technique could destroy even a god. Suddenly, a backpack flew from afar, which someone threw to the side. It turned out to be the main character, who deliberately threw the enemy's backpack and then aimed his pistol. He cleverly fired a shot at the backpack. The bullet fired from the pistol caused a loud explosion as it hit the backpack directly. The powerful explosion sent Fun Din flying several dozen meters to the side. After this, the tired and exhausted girl crashed into the wall, creating a huge hole in it. This unexpected attack did not stop Bayechin, and he continued to approach the girl, preparing for the next strike. However, when he got closer, the villain could not understand where Fun Din had disappeared to, since she had just been in that place. The entire Sector B3 was filled with smoke, and it seemed like the guy had killed all the guards, and Bai realized it was time to retreat. Concentrating all his energy, the enemy tried to find his opponents. With his concentrated energy, Bayechin was able to detect that his opponent was nearby. Meanwhile, Pharaoh came to his senses and began to look around. Watching what was happening, Pharaoh could not understand where Fun Din and her partner were. Suddenly, Fun Din herself, whom Pharaoh had been looking for earlier, appeared nearby. The alarmed ally decided to find out what condition the girl was in and whether she had managed to defeat the enemy. Realizing that she was unable to defeat the enemy, Lady revealed that her armor was broken and she was no longer able to use her power, and that the enemy was indeed very powerful. Before the smoke clears, they need to get away from here as quickly as possible, as the enemy could discover them at any moment. Suddenly, a snake nearby began to attack, hearing Fun Din say that they had received information about ancient martial arts and the enemy would return here soon. The lady easily defeated the snake that provoked the attack. The alarmed man did not understand why the fat man attacked her partner and for what reason. As a result of the incident, Pharaoh immediately began to apologize, stating that he had not given the snake such a command. Realizing that it was all a trap, the girl pushed him away and noted that killers often fall into their own traps. Crouching over the snake's body, Fun Din reached out her hand to its head, trying to get a closer look. While noting that the viewing through the snake was a unique opportunity, the attacker was aware of the rarity of the moment. Therefore, he did not want to miss such an opportunity for the girl to leave here without attention. Using the snake, the attacker decided to neutralize Fun Ding by using magical abilities designed to paralyze her. Having no idea how to prevent such a turn of events, the man only watched as events unfolded. After that, he grabbed the girl, preventing her from falling to the floor. Understanding what had happened, Pharaoh knew that Fun Din could not withstand such a simple blow due to the serious wound. Now the man has no idea why the enemy is trying to capture Fun Din, but he still decides to save her, picking her up in his arms and heading towards the exit. The thick smoke around made it almost impossible to determine where exactly to go. Suddenly, an enemy in the immediate vicinity exclaimed that Pharaoh should look at his actions, for now, having been rejected, he was trying to escape. At this time, the main character helped the girls get out of the elevator shaft, apologizing for the long wait. Entering the room, he asked the children to stay close to him and not fall behind. He also begged the girls to speak more quietly, as there could still be dangerous people in the room. And this turned out to be true, because at that very second, Pharaoh collided with a wall next to the main character. Despite what was happening, Ding Yino insisted on continuing the movement, warning the children not to pay attention to that man, as he was bad. The beaten man turned to the hero, saying that Fun Din was still there, but that his rescue was possible. Turning around, the young man simply refused, stating that he had no intention of doing so and that his only concern was the children. Saying goodbye to the villain, the guy began to leave, and Pharaoh could not understand why he was doing this. The ally couldn't understand why Ding Inua was addressing Fun Ding in such a way, considering that she had accepted him into the Red Glove, and he was showing such an indifferent attitude. In fact, Fun Din taught him to be cold-blooded, because a killer should be ruthless and selfish, that's right. The Pharaoh countered this argument by claiming that the boy would not be able to kill Hawken without the girl's participation, and yet Ding Inua did not count on her help, and the presence or absence of Fun Ding did not matter to him. On the verge of exhaustion, the villain suddenly mentioned the existence of the Blood Moon test. This was the only way to become a Red Glove, as the test was extremely difficult. Having passed the test, the hero would not have been able to come out alive if he had not coped with it. Pharaoh knew that Ding Yino was aiming for more than just being a killer, but without the girl's help, he wouldn't be able to pass this test. However, for the guy, it didn't matter. He never counted on help from others and knew that Pharaoh had his own abilities. Ding Inua felt that he was now half a new person, and he would be able to pass the Blood Moon trial on his own. These words only caused laughter from the Pharaoh, who considered Ding Inua too naive, not knowing the rules of this world. The experienced mercenary believed that Ding Inua was too naive, not knowing the rules of this world. Because the young man believed that the Blue Cave was the only group behind the Red Gloves, but there are groups that he doesn't even know about. These groups control the fate and future of the assassins in their world, so the Blood Moon test is not easy to pass. If he does not want to become a victim, he must save Fun Din. The young man truly believed in the words of the Pharaoh, but looked down on him. In fact, Fun Ding is just a puppet in the hands of the Red Glove, and she knows it better than anyone. Smiling, Pharaoh remarked that Fun Din had a very long history and probably really knew all the intricacies. Meanwhile, the girl lay unconscious on the floor and was unable to continue the fight. Bai Yechen communicated with Hoken and reported that the battle was already over. One of the enemies had escaped, and two were seriously injured. First, the Mad Doctor thanked his best bodyguard. He then said that Bai Yechen should do as he always does. In other words, destroy all enemies that have penetrated the laboratory. Lifting Fun Ding by the neck, Bai Yechen aimed to finish the battle that had begun and achieve final victory. In fact, he had never felt fear, and even the thought of having to kill this girl frightened him. Her skills were certainly impressive, but killing her now would be a disgrace to him as the heir to the martial arts. At the same time, the guy had no choice because he received a direct order. Because of the order, the girl was destined to die right here and now, and she also had to say goodbye to the occult art. As Bai Yechen prepared to strike, the question of whether he should really go through with killing this girl was running through his mind. And suddenly someone turned to him, saying that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. It was the protagonist who emphasized that he understood Bai Yechen's desire to become a hero, but he believed that killing a defenseless woman was unworthy of a true hero. From this came the young man's proposal. He could hand the girl over to the protagonist and tell his boss that he had already gotten rid of her body, and both would be satisfied, and thus, Bai Yechen would maintain his reputation as a hero. Even for the Pharaoh, these words sounded unexpected, and he did not expect that the young man would act exactly like that. Under the influence of these thoughts, the big man began to think about actually freeing the girl by handing her over to Ding Ino. Suddenly the guy agreed, saying that he would do it. Throwing the girl to the floor, Bai exclaimed that his opponent could now take her. This turn of events even surprised Dean Ino a little, who was about to take his partner and leave. Coming closer, the hero was already ready to take his companion. However, the impudent scoundrel saw this as an opportunity to strike and began to use a hidden attack technique using ancient martial arts. As it turned out, the protagonist expected this and used the first move of the 8 extremes of boxing. With the help of ancient arts, he was able to anticipate the attack and stopped his opponent first. Then came the second movement of the 8 extremes of boxing. Using all his strength, the young man struck his opponent to distract him. But that was not the end, and Dean Ino applied the third movement of the 8 extremes of boxing. The third move brought another strong blow, causing the opponent to feel pain. Unfortunately, the opponent was able to withstand such a powerful blow, which forced the young man to acknowledge his strength. Bai Yechen realized that his opponent also had mastered ancient martial arts, including the 8 extremes boxing technique, and this surprised him. There were no visible injuries on the opponent, and Bai Yechen became curious about what kind of knowledge in the occult arts Ding Ino possessed. The protagonist, who was focused on the battle, didn't even understand what Bai Yechen was asking him. This surprised the enemy, because Ding Ino, although a master of martial arts, had no idea about the history of these sects. That was why these 3 blows were not enough, because the hero seemed strong on the outside, but was weak on the inside and had no connection with the ancient martial arts sects. Bai Yechen realized that Ding Ino, despite trying to train him, was not a worthy opponent, but just a pathetic brat with no connection to ancient martial arts. Now the protagonist had to face Bai Yechen, who was going to demonstrate his 3 strikes to show what a real martial art was. Raising his hand, Ding Ino asked the enemy to wait a minute. Despite his words, the hero realized that he needed to move away from the girl. The enemy paid no attention to his words and prepared to attack. Bai Yechen believed that the guy who decided to fight him should take care of his own safety. It was truly an amazing sight for the young man to see real ancient martial arts in action. In the guy's opinion, his opponent was not serious at first, and he first fought with Fun Din, and then faced his 3 blows as if it was something incredible. Bai Yechen became even more energetic, thanks to his aura and ability to control the airflow. The hero continued to think that his opponent was like a superhuman and had probably already reached the limit of his capabilities, and yet now the guy realized that he could attack stronger, since his opponent had exhausted his strength. So the young man decided to focus on landing the most serious blows to force his opponent to surrender. With incredible speed, the hero prepared to strike, swinging his fist. The enemy felt that his opponent was about to use 3 strikes, and this began to irritate him. In response to this, Bai Yechen immediately attacked the protagonist, releasing one of his most powerful attacks. This strike was so charged with energy that Ding Yin's lungs could become useless, as the force of the strike could deprive them of the ability to breathe normally. The guy laughed and said that he didn't care about Bai Yechen's energy, he only needed to know that there was an opponent in front of him. This further angered the opponent, who tried to explain the nature of his energy. The villain attacked again, filling his blow with energy. This powerful blow even broke Ding Ino's helmet. So impressive was its strength. Under the impact of this blow, Dean began to float in the air, experiencing severe pain. As he fell, he realized that his enemy was not susceptible to the 8-fold boxing technique. In response to the protagonist's silent question, the opponent explained that energy makes him strong, that it is the core of ancient martial arts, and this is the main difference between them who own martial arts. He also realized that the young man had recently mastered these 3 strikes. Unable to bear such impudence from Bai Yechen, the hero decided to attack again, shouting that it was time to stop pretending, because his energy could not be endless. The fight continued, and the guy did everything possible to defeat his opponent. Bai Yechen, as an ancient martial artist, had long heard about the powerful and Hegelmanist 8 extremes boxing, and it did not leave him indifferent. However, the young man did not fully understand the essence of this technique, and his soft, weak blow disappointed his opponent. Bai Yechen guessed that Ding Ino might have heard about these skills and decided to use them, but he lacked the energy support and was just learning the style, nothing more. Having vented all his anger, the boy struck his opponent with full force using the Iron Mountain technique. Despite this, the villain managed to block the blow and did not feel pain. Now Ding Ino was forced to take the hit and defend against Bai Yechen's attacks. All this time the young man was thinking about whether there was a way to save himself, and whether his end would come at the hands of the enemy. The time had come to strike, and the enemy used all his might to deliver a powerful blow straight at the protagonist. Bai continued to advance, shouting that this blow would send the enemy to hell. Suddenly, Pharaoh appeared from behind, ready to deliver a surprise blow. Coming closer, he grabbed Bai Yechen and shouted that he was caught as the pharaoh was about to detain the enemy. All these actions were taken only so that Ding Inua could take Funding and leave. 2 minutes ago, the main character was talking to Pharaoh about saving Fundin. He understood that he couldn't handle this strong guy alone. So he asked Pharaoh to stop the guy at the last minute. This was their only chance to win and save the children and Fundin. With a heavy sigh, the young man realized that Pharaoh was acting like a woman during a fight, but he was dressed like a scapegoat. Then Ding Yino went into battle and told the children to wait for his signal so that they could escape, and if the signal did not come, then they would remain locked in. Sometime later, Pharaoh was still holding Bai Yechen, insisting that the protagonist take Funding away from here. After this event, the enemy was furious and could not understand how such a weak opponent could hold him back. It turned out that the pharaoh also possessed occult knowledge and used a poisonous bite against his opponent. Thanks to this sinister method, the villain felt unimaginable pain, as if he had been bitten by a poisonous snake. Meanwhile, the wounded hero returned to the calm girl and tried to help her leave this dangerous place. Ding Inua came to Funding's aid again, deciding to leave this place. Watching the fight, the young man realized that Pharaoh was indeed powerful, but he still would not be able to withstand such a strong opponent for long. Bai Yechen, trying to free himself, did his best to defeat the green-haired boy. Using the most powerful martial arts techniques, the villain continued to apply technique after technique, trying to free himself. But it turned out that all his efforts were in vain, because the pharaoh was much more agile than ordinary people, and his occult knowledge gave him additional abilities. When the hero was rescuing the mercenary, he also shouted at the children to follow him as he wanted to get them out of there. Sometime later, they arrived at a place that resembled an abandoned mine. The guy decided to enter the carriage to leave this place by train. Having ordered everyone to hold on tightly, he started the train, and the rescued captives began to get out. The train was rushing at a deadly speed, but Dean Eno managed to save everyone who was dear to him. Barely holding onto the train, the hero realized that this time he had failed, missing his target and almost dying. Dr. Hawken deserves to be included in the 3-star mission list, and the challenges with the bodyguards and the ancient arts of matter are serious obstacles. It remained a mystery what this doctor was doing with the children who were in his laboratory. The worried guy couldn't understand who these new people were and what they really represented. The Holy Land and occult arts were used by Yechen's partner, indicating his connection with ancient martial arts. The main thing in all this was that Fundin had a long history. That's why it was important for the guy to find out this together with the girl as soon as they got out of here. Luckily, this was supposed to happen very soon as the train stopped. Addressing the children, the boy told them that he needed to go first to check if it was safe to go further. When he got off the train, the boy began to feel incredible pain, realizing that the last battle had been very difficult for him. Continuing to move forward, Ding Yino tried to get to the desired exit as quickly as possible, but he knew that it was very difficult. Finally, they found a way out, and now Dean had to lead all the captives to freedom. The children discussed among themselves what this guy was going to do with them. None of them understood what the guy was thinking, considering his serious injuries, and he might not be able to get them out of here. Despite his injuries, the boy still returned to the train and said that he had found a van and that there was a road around the bend. He also dragged a cart and asked the children to help lift the woman and place her on it. The clever children happily responded to the hero's request and began to drag Funding, and Ding walk along with them. Sometime later, they approached the car, and the guy asked them to trust him. After the mercenary was loaded into the car, they decided to continue moving. The keys were in the car, and the hero managed to start it, after which they set off. The children were scared to be in a car with a stranger, but they were grateful for being saved. One of the girls noticed that the guy looked really bad, but Dean replied that it didn't matter. The young man asked the girls if they all lived in Dina City, and it turned out that this was the case. One of the girls sheepishly stated that there was no place for strangers here, as they only came here for bad reasons. The guy immediately noticed that this city seemed to be unfriendly to outsiders, just like the taxi driver he had met earlier. Turning to the children, the guy still became interested in how they could get to the city, since he was going to take them home. One of the girls immediately replied that none of them lived in the city and could not return home. It turned out that they all live in a ghetto, not in a regular city. At this time, events continued in the laboratory, and Yechen returned to Hawken. Hawken immediately apologized for not being able to fulfill his promise and bring only one of the 3 guys with him. The guy who stayed in the lab was disabled, but the other 2 ran away because of him. Yechen was interested in how people could escape from him. He said that he would not let it happen again because he was seriously injured, and if something went wrong, he might not be able to fight like before. The pharaoh concluded that Hawken would not be able to escape, as any target of the red glove was doomed to death. Hakan was glad that Bai Yechin was speaking to him, for he saw his energy and valued his red glove, which was a source of pleasure for him from endless killings. Hakan realized that this organization had too many secrets and they had enough time to get to know each other better. Suddenly, Bai Yechin expressed a desire to see her, and Hakan couldn't understand why the boy had such a desire. However, Hakan agreed to show her and said she was fine. It turned out that it was Bai Yechin's sister, and she was sick, but the doctor promised to cure her. All this time, the sister was in a flask that provided her with life support. The girl was badly hurt, and even a doctor could not cure her quickly. Hakan realized that only he could cure Bai Yechin's sister, but only if no one interfered with him. Sometime later, Bai Yechin threw Pharaoh into the room, declaring that it was meant specifically for him, and he would regret allowing the two criminals to escape from the lab. Seeing his opponent, Pharaoh decided to ask him if he was really captured for experiments. The enemy realized that Pharaoh was going to his own death and gave him this opportunity. The green-haired boy just laughed, wanted to see who was really in the wrong here. After this, he nevertheless closed the door and asked his captive not to die within a week. Meanwhile, events continued in the ghetto of the city of Dina. Having arrived at the ghetto, the hero assumed that the children's home must be nearby, and no matter what their reasons for not going home were, the important thing now was to get out of the car. The young man understood that he was seriously injured and it was better to stay at home than to be at Hawkins. One of the girls decided to approach the young man and ask what he was going to do, to which Dean replied that he was too tired and needed rest. Looking at the boy, the girl said that strangers were not welcome here, and he might regret his decision. Taking off one of the gloves, the boy began to think that he needed to contact the blind wizard. But he didn't know what to do with his injuries, and his arm was broken and he couldn't fight. Yino prepared to call the blind wizard. He began to think about how to use his tongue to dial a phone number, but suddenly someone approached the car from behind. Sometime later, events took place near the clinic. Reporters interviewed the director about the attack on the hospital and the number of victims. They were also interested in information about the suspect and his motives. The police officer said it was a terrorist attack and promised to punish the suspect. One of the journalists asked the director whether Ward B1 was specifically chosen by the suspect because there were few patients there. The director replied that he did not know the suspect's motives. Hakan approached and asked the reporter if she would like the suspect to choose a place with more people to attack. The doctor suggested that the suspect wanted to warn him against research into the birth of a new human race. Thanks to the prompt intervention of the police, major losses were prevented. He also said that 2 workers suffered minor injuries, while the suspect was seriously injured and did not pose a threat. The hospital will continue to operate as usual, but with increased security, Hakan assured everyone present that they could rely on them. Together with the police, they intended to catch the suspects, and anyone who noticed suspicious behavior should report it to the hospital or the police. The protagonist finds himself handcuffed to a pipe because he was kidnapped from his car. The kidnapper turned out to be a man who was glad that the captive had woken up. Coming closer to the guy, the kidnapper asked him not to die, as he planned to get rich by turning him over to the police. The hero quickly realized that this man was the very suspect they had talked about on TV. But the guy began to deny that he was a suspect. The kidnapper claimed that he really was the suspect because he had seen his van and knew what was in it, and besides, the guy was seriously injured and matched the description in the news. Despite his pity for the girl's death in the truck, the kidnapper believed that her organs could be sold for a good price. Dean got angry and asked the man if he was sure that the girl was really dead, because otherwise all his actions would have been in vain. Listening to the man, Dean realized that he was the one who put her in the refrigerator in the truck, and that staying in such conditions for a long time could lead to death. These words greatly alarmed Dean because he did not know how long his friend had been in the refrigerator, and ordinary people cannot survive for long in conditions of 30 degrees Celsius. So Fun Ding could have died from the cold. The man insisted that the boy eat, fearing for his life. Dean insisted that he needed to hurry to save the girl in the van. The kidnapper realized that Dean was up to something and added a sleeping pill to his food. Now the guy had to eat food to calm down. The kidnapper tried to force-feed the boy. He threatened Dean, warning him that he could hurt him even more. Suddenly someone knocked loudly on the door, expressing obvious displeasure. Realizing that he needed to check who it was, the man ordered Dean to remain silent and not move. Otherwise, he would face a dangerous punishment. However, the scoundrel risked opening the door to find out who was knocking. Suddenly, the man behind the door kicked the scoundrel hard in the stomach. Luckily, it was Fun Din, who was feeling fine and ready to continue fighting. The young man, watching his partner, was glad to see that she was alive and that the kidnapper had been caught off guard. However, the girl was outraged and decided to take revenge on the hero for locking her in the refrigerator, putting her life in danger. The scoundrel began to fight again, warning the girl that she should be wary of him, as he intended to strike her. They were joined by another powerful assistant, a courier who had previously delivered weapons to them. The bully especially hated those who interfered in other people's affairs. The frightened man dared to ask the giant what he was going to do with him. The courier also noted that the girl who called them was quite rude, but Fun Din did not see a problem with this and insisted on finishing what she started. In a daze of fear, the man screamed that he could not be killed because he had a daughter named Fun. This word made the girl very angry. She thought that the scoundrel called her name only to save his life. The giant continued to advance, getting closer and closer to the frightened man. However, the courier realized that the man was lying. Suddenly, a girl's voice was heard behind him. She confirmed that this man's words were true. Indeed, her name is Fun. The main character, standing over the villain, could not believe that they wanted to sell the girl's organs, and it is not surprising that she did not want to return, having such a father. Having turned away from such a father, the young man thought about his destruction. The man began to justify himself, promising that he would not allow his daughter to suffer any longer, and he claimed that if he was killed, no one would be able to take care of her. However, the girl asked a mercenary for a gun to carry out her plan. Without thinking, the courier handed over his pistol to Fun Din, as it seemed like a smart idea. It turned out that Fun wanted to give the girl a gun so that she could make a choice. Both were named Fun, so the girl decided to give the little girl the opportunity to fulfill her long-time dream. She needed this gun to kill her father. The stunned man began screaming, asking if the people around him thought they were normal if a child was capable of killing his father. Even the main character didn't understand what was happening and only thought that perhaps the girl was being tested. The frightened girl continued to think about the gun, not knowing what to do. Finally, the little girl decided to take the gun and slowly reached out her hand towards it. Shortly after, the gun was pointed directly at the man, who was shaking with fear. The father tried his best to convince the girl, saying that he loved her very much. Finally, the girl made a decision and pointed the gun straight at Fu Din, and she screamed that she was not going to kill her father, but those she killed would do it themselves. The man immediately became angry and asked Fun if she was really tired of life. However, Fun Din decided to stop it and asked everyone to wait, because she herself was very interested in what would happen next. Starting to cry, the girl screamed for the strangers to leave her house or she would shoot. Fun Din began to explain to the girl that she probably didn't understand something because her father kidnapped Ding Yino, and now the little girl assumes that she is aiming at the killers. Fun Din also decided to remind the little girl that she was saved by a man who was an ally, and she should thank him. The girl's father sold her for money, and it was unknown why the little girl still protected him. Continuing to take aim at her enemies, Fun exclaimed that she forbids her father for being tried because she voluntarily sold her organs. Her mother died shortly after she was born, so her father had to raise her alone. He couldn't find a job and was deceived by others, which caused him to lose his money. Although the girl realized that something was wrong with her father, she still wanted to help him repay his debt. So she believed that outsiders should not interfere in her family's affairs. The big guy couldn't believe this turn of events and understood that the children didn't know how to shoot. The man persistently approached the child, while the girl continued to threaten to shoot. This event began to disturb the hero, and he did not understand what the big guy was doing, attacking the little girl. Ding decided to shout at Fun Ding to stop the big guy, but the girl simply remained silent and watched everything that was happening. With each passing second, the man came closer and ordered the child to surrender. Little Fun started screaming, turned away, and tried to pull the trigger of the gun. To her surprise, it turned out that the gun had no bullets to shoot its target. The huge man understood that the child in front of him definitely wanted to die and continued to attack. Suddenly, Fun Din came closer to the little girl and stood next to her, as she liked her very much. Influenced by this action, the determined girl assured that she would not bother their family anymore. Sometime later, the events continued in one of the houses in the ghetto. The whole house was filled with screams that Fun Din was simply examining the wound, and there was nothing strange about it. However, while examining the wound, the young man felt that Fun most likely wanted to kill him, since she bandaged the wound very carelessly. This cruelty on the part of the girl was caused by the fact that the main character betrayed the pharaoh, but the guy believed that they were faced with a very strong opponent and could not act differently. Even the girl realized that the situation could not be changed and that they definitely needed to check the main character's wounds. As soon as the bandage was removed from the guy's hand, Fun immediately became scared and surprised, as she did not expect to see an ordinary hand in front of her. Because of this statement, the young man began to panic and wanted to know what had happened to his hand. Luckily, his arm was fine and not even broken. Looking at his hand, Ding Inua immediately felt that his rapid recovery ability had returned, but he wondered why it hadn't activated before. Coming closer, the ally decided to ask the guy where he acquired these esoteric abilities, and after all, they were friends, and Fun persistently asked to tell at least a little about them. Slightly alarmed, The hero only said that he himself did not know how he acquired these abilities. Watching the protagonist's abilities, Fun knew that he might soon pay for it, because her abilities weren't as risky as his. Suddenly, a girl nearby exclaimed, considering this unfair. The little girl thinks it's wrong that ladies' wounds don't heal so quickly, and it would be better if everyone had the same ability. The sad girl realized that if her mother had had such an ability, she might not have died. To this, the young man simply replied that the world is unfair and not everything can always be perfect. The heroine nevertheless decided to come closer to the girl to talk to her. Smiling, the girl noted that they really were very similar, although the little girl was luckier because she had a father. However, Funding wanted to explain to little Fun that any change comes at a price. Everyone in the room sacrificed a lot, as did the main character himself. At this time, the father and the big man returned to the house and announced that they had brought medicine and bandages. The man also said he bought some things for Fundin and asked her to take them upstairs before he went home. As he walked up the stairs, the man heard Fundin say that Hawken had hired a lot of security to protect the hospital. The police have also increased their patrols at the hospital, and it will be difficult to carry out their plans. But there was some good news. Hawken will travel to Europe next week for a global health conference. So the girl assumed that the doctor should go with his staff, and this was good news. But there was bad news too, and the head of the ghetto Dole had his eye on Fundin, and he supplies organs to Hawken. He learned that they were the ones who killed his people and damaged his business, and so he would be able to find their entire team within 2 days. Fundin realized that they urgently needed to leave this place and see what the enemy had prepared. At the same time, the man brought medicine and clothes for the main character. What he saw next shocked him greatly, because he did not understand how bones could be restored so quickly. Although he was aware that the bones had not yet been restored, he could already move his hand. Ding Inua suddenly felt like he was starting to lose consciousness, as if his body was regenerating too quickly. The little girl's father also brought bandages and some water and placed them on the table. The alarmed man nevertheless decided to find out whether his guests were really killers, and realizing that this was indeed the case, he begged them not to involve his daughter in their affairs. With a heavy sigh, Dean Eno stated that absolutely everyone here had something to do with this mess. Suddenly, as soon as he said the last sentence, a cloud appeared in his eyes. After this, the young man felt as if he had entered another world and his soul had left his body. An unfamiliar voice nearby exclaimed that the flickering on the facade could not hide the truth. The voice ordered the hero to open his eyes and see where he was. The worried guy immediately began asking where the mysterious entity that was addressing him was. Now he no longer considered himself a weakling and wanted to know why he had ended up in this world again. The entity calling itself Moron believed that the boy should have died without his protection. Healing Ding Yino cost him his last hopes of life, but it was hard for him to understand this, because the guy was an ordinary mortal. The young man really couldn't understand what Moron was saying, and simply listened to him to understand why he was there. Looking around, Dean saw another invisible entity fighting a huge monster. Compared to this being, he looked insignificant, like an ordinary man against a deity. In the real world, the protagonist was unconscious, and the man was trying hard to justify himself, saying that he hadn't done anything to the guy. He only bought water under their supervision and could do nothing more. The big man realized that now Dean Eno could die from exhaustion, and he needed to be brought back to consciousness immediately. Suddenly, the girl decided to stop him because she realized something. Namely, that her ally faced the same thing that she once faced. Moron continued to talk to the hero and explained that these two energies were continuously destroying his body and he needed to do something to stop it. Watching everything that was happening, the young man assumed that the guy next to him was playing the role of Bayechin. As it turns out, it was the energy he holds in the protagonist and intends to destroy him. And the second essence is the medicine that the doctor made for Ding Eno. This statement was truly shocking because the guy could not even imagine that there would be medicine in his body. Then he remembered the doctor who had told him earlier that this was an excellent remedy that Mr. Hawken had invented. Now his body simply cannot withstand such a flow of energy, which is why it is gradually deteriorating. The mysterious entity asked the guy to remember his memories because they can cause different emotions. Memories are the key that makes people feel. Remember your grandfather who taught you Bajiquin and his death. Moron ordered the boy to release all these feelings. The guy still didn't understand what he needed to do and decided to ask the entity about it. The invisible being said that the flame led to the depths of his memory, and he needed to follow it. Thanks to this flame, he will be able to once again feel the sensations that he had during the upheavals. At this time, Fun Ding stood over the protagonist and thought about his internal wound from the battle with Bayechin. Only those with ancient martial arts could suffer such injuries, while ordinary people would simply die. But why is Ding Yino fighting death right now? Fun Din began to address the protagonist, saying that he urgently needed to wake up because they were going to leave. Suddenly, someone started knocking hard on the door, as if trying to knock it down. The big guy asked the man if it was his friend knocking so hard, but it turned out that it was not. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the guard ordered the man to go up to the top floor and inform Fun Din about the incident.